Chapter 1. The Storm's Mercy. The storm had teeth. Ophelia felt them in the wind that tore at her cloak, in the rain that lashed her face like frozen needles. The lane between the village and Blackthorn Manor had dissolved into a river of mud, and still she ran, her boots slipping, her lungs burning with each gasping breath. The child's scream echoed again in her memory, high and thin, swallowed almost immediately by thunder. She'd been mucking out the third stall when she'd heard it, that sound that turned her blood to ice. Through the stable door, she'd seen the small figure stumbling along the cliff path, too close to the edge where the earth had been crumbling all week. The boy couldn't have been more than 6, dressed in clothes too fine for wandering alone in a tempest. Who lets a child out in this? Ophelia's father would have told her to mind her own business. The manor folk didn't concern themselves with stable girls, and stable girls who valued their positions didn't go, chasing after lords' children in lightning storms. But she'd seen the way the ground shifted beneath the boy's feet. She'd watched him fall. Now she skidded to a halt at the cliff's edge, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rain had turned the world into a watercolor painting, all bleeding grays and blacks. Below, perhaps 20 feet down, a narrow ledge jutted from the cliff face. The child clung to a twisted root, his small body pressed against the rock. "Hold on," Ophelia shouted, though the wind stole her words. The boy's head lifted. Even through the rain, she saw his face pale as bone china, eyes too large and too dark. Something about him sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the storm. Later. Think about that later. The old oak tree leaned out over the cliff, its branches thick and gnarled. Ophelia grabbed the rope she kept coiled at her belt, a habit from years of working with horses, and looped it around the sturdiest branch she could reach. Her fingers, already numb from cold, fumbled with the knot. "I'm coming down," she called. "Don't let go." She'd climbed worse. Last summer, she'd scaled the stable roof to rescue a cat, and the year before that, she'd descended into the old well when the bucket rope snapped. But this was different. The ledge was narrow, the rock slick with rain, and the child below watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Ophelia wrapped the rope around her waist and began her descent. The world narrowed to immediate things. The burn of rope against her palms, the scrape of rock against her shoulder, the roar of wind and water. Lightning split the sky, turning everything white for a heartbeat. In that flash, she saw the boy clearly, his face not just pale but luminous, his eyes reflecting light like a cat's. What her foot slipped. For a terrible moment, she swung free, the rope her only tether to safety. Then her boot found purchase, and she pressed herself against the cliff, face, breathing hard. "Please hurry," the child whispered, and impossibly, she heard him clearly despite the storm. His voice carried a strange weight, an accent she couldn't place. "He's coming. Who's coming?" But the boy only shook his head, his small hands white-knuckled on the root. Ophelia forced herself to move. 3 more feet. 2. Her hand closed around the boy's wrist so cold, like touching marble, and she pulled him against her chest. He weighed almost nothing, a bundle of bones and soaked velvet. "Hold tight," she murmured into his dark hair. He smelled of rain and something else, something mineral and old, like the scent of the deep caves beneath the moor. The climb back up should have been impossible. She was strong from years of stable work, but carrying a child one-handed while hauling herself up a rain-slick cliff in a storm tested every limit she had. Her muscles screamed, the rope bit into her waist. Once, her hand slipped entirely, and only the boy's sudden, fierce grip on her cloak kept them both from plummeting. His fingers were so strong, unnaturally strong. When she finally dragged them both over the cliff's edge, Ophelia collapsed onto the muddy ground. The child still clutched against her. The rain hammered down, and lightning danced across the sky like white-hot veins. "Thank you," the boy said, and pulled back to look at her. Up close, his beauty was disturbing features too perfect, too symmetrical, like a porcelain doll. "You saved my life. Where are your parents?" Ophelia managed between gasps. "The manor, are you from Blackthorn Manor?" Before he could answer, a sound cut through the storm. Hoofbeats. The boy's face went stark with fear, real, visceral terror that transformed his strange composure into something achingly human. "No," he breathed. No, not yet." A figure materialized from the rain and darkness. He sat astride a black horse that steamed in the cold air, both rider and mount utterly still despite the practice. Chaos of the storm. The man was tall, his greatcoat black as pitch, his face shadowed by the hood he wore. But even through the rain and darkness, Ophelia felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. The boy scrambled behind her, his small hands fisting in her cloak. "Step away from the child." The man's voice was low and cold, carrying effortlessly through the storm. Not a request, a command. Ophelia's instinct was to obey something, and that voice demanded obedience, but the terror radiating from the boy at her back kept her rooted. She'd saved him from one death. She wouldn't deliver him to another. "He's hurt," she said, pleased that her voice came out steady. "He needs warmth and... You do not understand the situation." The man dismounted in a single fluid movement. As he approached, lightning flared again, and Ophelia saw his face. Beautiful, terrible, ageless, skin like alabaster, sharp cheekbones, dark hair that fell in wet waves to his shoulders. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, pale gray, almost colorless, and ancient. She had the sudden, irrational certainty that those eyes had witnessed the fall of kingdoms. "Please," the boy whispered behind her. "Don't let him take me." The man stopped 10 paces away, close enough that Ophelia could see the unnatural stillness of his posture, the way the rain seemed to avoid his face, close enough to see that he cast no breath mist in the cold air. "The child," he said, "is mine." "He's a boy," Ophelia countered, her hand moving protectively to the small shoulder behind her. "Not a possession." Something flickered in those pale eyes, surprise perhaps, or something darker. The man tilted his head, studying her with the patient focus of a predator. "You risked your life for him." "I couldn't let him fall." "Why not?" The question caught her off guard. Because he's a child. Because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing?" The man's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. How refreshingly quaint. He took a step closer, and the boy's grip on her cloak tightened to the point of pain. Ophelia's hand dropped to the small knife at her belt, useless, against a man of his size and evident strength. But it was all she had. "Stay back," she warned. "Or what? You'll carve me with your stable blade?" His voice held dark amusement. "You truly don't know, do you?" "Know what?" The man looked at the boy, still huddled behind Ophelia's legs. "Tell her, Owain. Tell this brave, foolish girl what you are." The boy Owain made a small, desperate sound. Lightning split the sky again, and in that moment of brilliance, Ophelia saw the truth she'd been trying to ignore. Owain's too perfect face, his unnatural pallor, the way his eyes caught light and threw it back like mirrors. The impossible strength in his small hands, the mineral scent that clung to him. "He's not human," she whispered. "No," the man agreed. "And neither am I." He moved within human speed, closing the distance between them before Ophelia could even flinch. His hand, cold as winter stone, caught her wrist, gentle but immovable. Up close, she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the almost imperceptible movement beneath his skin that suggested something other than a heartbeat. "But you," he said softly, studying her face with that unsettling intensity, "are very human indeed. Mortal. Fragile." His thumb pressed against her pulse point. "Warm." Ophelia's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Who are you?" she managed. "Lord Emery's Caro." The name fell between them like a stone into deep water. "And you have just saved the only creature in this world that I treasure." He released her wrist and took a step back. The small distance felt like mercy. "The boy," Emery's continued, his voice taking on a formal cadence, "is Owain ap Murig, last of the Blackthorn bloodline. He is also," a pause, weighted with significance, "my ward, my responsibility. And as of 3 days ago, my enemy's primary target." Rain streamed down Ophelia's face as she tried to process his words. "Enemy, target." The boy behind her trembled. "I don't understand," she said. "No, you don't." Emery's looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. "But you will, because by saving him, you've woven yourself into a web you cannot escape." He gestured toward the horse. "Come, the storm worsens, and we have much to discuss." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Then you'll die." He said it matter-of-factly, without malice. My enemies felt Owain's distress. "They're coming even now, and when they arrive, they will kill anyone who has touched him, helped him, or seen him. That includes you." As if summoned by his words, a new sound rose beneath the thunder, a high, keening cry that made every hair on Ophelia's body stand on end. It came from the direction of the village, from the moor beyond. Owain whimpered and pressed, closer to her back. "You have perhaps 5 minutes," Emery said calmly, though his hand had moved to the sword at his hip. Choose. Come with me to Blackthorn Manor, where I can protect you both. Or stay here and face what hunts us. The keening cry came again, closer now. In the distance, Ophelia thought she saw shapes moving through the rain, too many of them, too fast. She looked down at Owain, at his terrified, too old eyes in his child's face, then back at Emery's, at the ancient creature who had just offered her protection in the same breath he'd threatened her death. This is madness. But the alternative was dying in the mud while something inhuman tore her apart. If I come, Ophelia said, you'll explain everything. Everything you can bear to hear. Emery's agreed. He held out his hand, pale, elegant, deadly. An invitation and a contract. Ophelia took it. His fingers closed around hers, cold as marble and twice as strong, and he pulled her toward the horse with Owain still, clinging to her cloak. The creature stood utterly calm despite the storm, as if it too were something more than natural. Emery's mounted in one fluid motion, then reached down and lifted her as though she weighed nothing, settling her in front of him. Owain, he pulled up behind, the boy's arms wrapping around Ophelia's waist. Hold on. Emery's murmured against her ear, his breath cold against her wet skin. Then they were moving, the horse surging forward with impossible speed, the storm and the village and the approaching shapes dissolving into a blur of darkness and rain. Ophelia felt Emery's arm like an iron band around her waist, anchoring her, keeping her from falling. They rode toward Blackthorn Manor, toward answers and danger, and a destiny she hadn't chosen but could no longer escape. Behind them, the keening rose to a shriek, and in the moment before the manor's gates closed behind them, Ophelia caught a glimpse of what pursued. Pale figures with eyes like coal embers, moving with the same inhuman grace as Emery's. Their mouths opened to reveal teeth too long, too sharp. The gates slammed shut with a sound like thunder. Welcome, Emery said into the sudden eerie silence, to my world. Chapter 2. Sanctuary of Shadows. Blackthorn Manor rose from the moor like a crown of thorns, all Gothic spires and dark stone, windows that gleamed like watching eyes. Ophelia had seen it from a distance her whole life, a forbidding silhouette against the sky, but she'd never imagined she would enter its gates. Now, standing in the grand entrance hall with water pooling around her boots, she felt impossibly small. The interior was a study in contrasts, opulent decay, beautiful rot, tapestries hung from walls paneled in dark wood, their colors faded but still rich, crimson and gold and deep forest green. Candelabras held dozens of candles that guttered in drafts from the high ceiling, casting dancing shadows across marble floors, inlaid with intricate patterns. Everything spoke of wealth, of age, of secrets kept for centuries. Owain still clung to her hand, his small fingers cold and tight. Emery's had dismounted in the courtyard and disappeared without a word, leaving them in the care of a silent servant who'd led them inside. The servant, a woman perhaps in her 60s, with iron-gray hair and a face carved from granite, had said nothing, only gestured for them to follow. Where Ophelia began, but the woman shook her head sharply. A door opened at the far end of the hall, and Emery's emerged, his greatcoat gone, now dressed in black velvet that made his pale skin seem even more luminous. He'd tied his dark hair back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, the predatory elegance of his features. Tegwin, he said to the servant, prepare the rose room for our guest, and have Murig attend Owain, the boy needs dry clothes and rest. My lord. Tegwin's voice was surprisingly deep, resonant. She bowed and placed a hand on Owain's shoulder. The boy looked up at Ophelia, his dark eyes pleading. It's all right, Ophelia said gently, though she wasn't sure it was. I'll be nearby. Owain hesitated, then allowed himself to be led away down a corridor lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow their passage. Leaving Ophelia alone with Emery's, he regarded her in silence, his pale gaze traveling from her muddy boots to her soaked cloak to her face. She fought the urge to fidget under that ancient scrutiny. You're shivering, he observed. I'm wet and cold, and you promised me answers. So I did. A slight smile touched his lips, there and gone like a ghost. But first, warmth. You're no use to anyone if you catch your death of cold. He gestured toward the grand staircase. This way. Ophelia didn't move. I don't take orders from monsters. Emery's finished, his tone conversational. A wise policy. But consider, you're in my home, surrounded by my people, utterly at my mercy. You can walk upstairs with dignity, or I can carry you. The choice, as always, is yours." His words held no threat, only observation, which somehow made them more unsettling. Ophelia's jaw tightened, but she moved toward the stairs. Her boots squelched with each step, leaving wet prints on the pristine marble. Emery's followed at a careful distance, close enough that she felt his presence like a cold draft at her back. The rose room was aptly named. Every surface bloomed with roses carved into the bed frame, embroidered on the curtains, painted on the ceiling in a tangle of thorns and petals. A fire already crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across silk and velvet furnishings. "Tegwin is efficient," Emery's remarked from the doorway. He hadn't entered the room, she noticed, stood exactly at the threshold, as if an invisible barrier held him there. Invitation required for entry. The thought surfaced unbidden from old stories, old warnings. "There are dry clothes in the wardrobe," Emery's continued. "When you're ready, join me. In the library. Owain will be there as well. I'll send Tegwin to guide you." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "You're safe here. Within these walls, nothing can harm you without going through me first." "And should that comfort me?" Ophelia asked. "Being protected by whatever you are?" "No," he said simply. "It shouldn't, but it's the truth nonetheless." He turned to leave, then stopped. "What is your name?" "I've brought you into my home, placed you under my protection, and I don't even know what to call you." "Ophelia," she said, surprising herself. "Ophelia Furch Owen, of the village stables." "Ophelia." He tested the name, his accent making it sound like music. "Thank you, Ophelia Furch Owen, for saving Owain's life. Whatever else follows, that debt is real." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Ophelia stood alone in the rose-covered room, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant rumble of thunder. Her hands shook as she stripped off her wet cloak. Whether from cold or fear, or the sheer impossibility of everything that had happened, she couldn't say. Vampires. They're vampires. The word tasted strange in her mind, like something from a fever dream. But what else could they be? The pallor, the coldness, the unnatural speed and strength. The way Emery's cast no breath mist, the way Owain's eyes reflected light like an animal's. She'd saved a vampire child from falling to his death. Can they even die from falling? The wardrobe held dresses far finer than anything she'd ever worn, silk and velvet in deep jewel tones. She chose the simplest, a wool dress in dark blue, soft and warm against her chilled skin. It fit surprisingly well, as if made for her, which sent a fresh chill down her spine. Had Emery's expected her? Planned for this? Ophelia was drying her hair by the fire when a knock came at the door. Tegwin entered without waiting for permission, carrying a tray laden with bread, cheese, and what looked like mulled wine. "Eat," the woman said, setting the tray on a small table. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" Tegwin's granite face cracked into something that might have been sympathy. "For the truth, child. It's a heavier burden than you know." "Are you?" Ophelia hesitated. "Are you like them?" "Human as you are, girl. But I've served the Blackthorn line for 40 years, and I know more about their world than most mortals could bear." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Lord Emrys is not what you fear. He's worse and better than the stories. Remember that." The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and good. Ophelia ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind churning. Through the window, she could see the storm beginning to ease, the rain softening to a persistent drizzle. Below, the manor's grounds stretched into darkness, and beyond that, the moor. I could run. The thought came unbidden. While Emrys was distracted, while they thought her cowed and obedient, she could slip out, make for the village, and die. She remembered his words. They will kill anyone who has touched him, helped him, or seen him. The keening cry, the pale figures with ember eyes. No, running would only trade one death for another. When Tegwin returned to guide her to the library, Ophelia followed without protest. The library was a cathedral of books. Shelves stretched from floor to impossibly high ceiling, filled with volumes in every language, every age. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, mixed with wood smoke from another hearth. Owain sat curled in an overstuffed chair near the fire, now dressed in clean clothes, a blanket wrapped around his small shoulders. Emrys stood by the window, silhouetted against the night. "Ophelia," Owain said, his face brightening. "You came." "Of course." She crossed to him, checking him automatically for injuries, the habits of caring for stable animals, transferring easily to frightened children. Are you hurt? No. I heal. Quickly. He said it matter-of-factly, as a child might mention having brown hair. Sit, please, Emery said without turning from the window. I imagine you have questions. Ophelia settled in the chair beside Owain's, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Start with what you are. Both of you. Vampires, Emery said, finally turning to face her. Though that word carries so much mythology, so much fiction, that it's nearly useless. We are beings who were once human but have been transformed. We require blood to survive. We possess strength, speed, and senses beyond mortal capacity, and we do not age. How old are you? I saw the signing of the Magna Carta, he said quietly. I walked through London during the Great Plague. I watched the Welsh princes fall to English swords and the monasteries burn. Does that answer your question? 800 years, perhaps more. Ophelia looked at Owain. And him? Owain is different. Emery's moved to the fire, kneeling, beside the boy's chair with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his predatory nature. Tell her, Owain. She deserves to understand. The boy's hand found Ophelia's, clutching it like a lifeline. I was born this way, he whispered. Not turned, born vampire. My mother was mortal, my father. He looked at Emery's. His father was Murig ap Cadok, lord of the Blackthorn line before me, Emery said. Murig broke an ancient law. He loved a mortal woman truly, deeply, and they conceived a child. Such births are vanishingly rare. Most vampire children die within hours. But Owain lived. My mother didn't, Owain said, his voice small. She died giving birth to me, and my father. He trailed off, blinking rapidly. Died protecting you from those who would kill you for being born, Emery's finished. His hand rested on Owain's dark hair, a gesture of surprising tenderness. Murig was my friend for 3 centuries. On his deathbed, he asked me to protect his son, to raise him, teach him, keep him safe from those who believe vampire children are abominations that must be destroyed. Who? Ophelia asked. Who wants to kill a child? The Court of Ash, Emery said, and the name fell like a curse. The ruling council of vampire kind. They hold that our kind should remain pure all turned, none born. They fear that children like Owain, who grow and change and mature, could expose our existence to the mortal world, or worse, become something powerful enough to challenge their authority. So you've been hiding him for 6 years. But 3 days ago, the court discovered his location. They sent hunters Ashbourne, the most ruthless of our kind. The attack came at dawn. Owain fled during the chaos, and I've been searching for him ever since. Emery's pale eyes met hers, until a brave, foolish, stable girl rescued him from a cliff. The pieces aligned in Ophelia's mind like a puzzle forming. Those things outside the gates, Ashbourne scouts, Emery's confirmed. They cannot enter Blackthorn without invitation, and these walls have been warded by blood and magic for centuries. But they will not give up. They'll lay siege, wait for us to emerge, send assassins during the day when my strength ebbs. During the day? Ophelia seized on that. Then the stories are true? Sunlight burns, Owain said, pulling back the blanket to reveal a bandage on his forearm. Beneath it, Ophelia caught a glimpse of angry red skin, blistered and weeping. I was on the cliff path when the clouds broke. Just for a moment. It hurt so much. Horror and pity warred in Ophelia's chest. To be born into a world that could kill you with simple sunlight. To be hunted by your own kind for the crime of existing. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Why not simply keep me prisoner until your enemies leave? Because you saved him. Emery's rose, moving to a desk where he poured wine into a crystal glass. Because you risked your life without hesitation, knowing nothing of what he was or what it would cost you. That speaks to character. He brought her the glass, their fingers brushing as she took it. His skin was so cold. And because I need your help. My help? What could a stable girl possibly... Owain is injured, frightened, and weakened, Emery's interrupted. He needs someone to care for him during the day, when I'm at my most vulnerable. Someone human, who can move in sunlight without harm. Someone he trusts. His gaze held hers. He's already attached to you. I saw it in the courtyard. You represent safety to him now. You want me to be his nursemaid? I want you to help me keep him alive, Emery said quietly. The Ashbourne will not stop. Not until they take his head or I give them mine instead. Our best hope is to move him somewhere safer, but he's too weak to travel yet. He needs time to heal, to feed, to regain his strength. He paused. And he needs to trust the person who guards him in daylight. Ophelia looked at Owain, at his young face and ancient eyes, at the hope dawning there. If I refuse? She asked. I'll have Tegwin escort you to the village at dawn and provide you with enough gold to flee somewhere far from here. The Ashborn may or may not find you. Emrys's expression was unreadable. I will not compel you. Ophelia furched Owen. This choice must be yours. The wine was warm and spiced, spreading heat through her chest. Outside, the storm had finally broken, leaving only the steady drip of water from the eaves. Ophelia thought of her father in his cups, of her small room above the stables, of the life that had been grinding her down day by day, and she thought of the boy who'd clung to her in the storm, who'd whispered pleas with such desperate hope. How long? She asked. A week, perhaps 2. Long enough for his wounds to heal, and for me to arrange safe passage to my holdings in the north. And then you may leave with wealth enough to start a new life anywhere you choose. Or, Emrys tilted his head, studying her. You may stay. I could use someone with your courage in my service. Service to a vampire lord, Ophelia said flatly. Service to a child who needs protecting, Emrys corrected. The nature of his guardian is unfortunate but necessary. Owain's hand tightened around hers. Please, he whispered. I'm scared. And there it was, the truth that mattered more than fear or wisdom or survival instinct. A frightened child who'd already lost too much, who faced enemies she barely understood, who'd found safety in her presence. I'll stay, Ophelia said, and felt the weight of the words settle over her like a mantle. For 2 weeks, to help Owain heal. Relief flickered across Emrys's features, so quick she almost missed it. Thank you, but I want answers, real ones. About your kind, about the court, about what I'm risking. You shall have them. He raised his own glass in a small toast. To bargains made and kept. Ophelia drank, the wine warming her blood, and tried not to know. Think about the pale figures waiting beyond the gates, or the ancient creature who'd just bound her to his cause, or the way Owain smiled at her with relief and something that looked dangerously like trust. She'd come to save a child. Now she was entangled in a war between immortals, and the only way out was through. Chapter 3. Blood and Revelation. Ophelia woke to silence so complete it felt like another world. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the rose carving swam into focus. The heavy velvet bed curtains, the dying embers in the fireplace, Blackthorn Manor, vampires, a child who needed her protection. Not a dream then. Gray morning light filtered through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the still air. Ophelia pushed back the covers, silk sheets, softer than anything she'd ever slept in, and padded to the window. The grounds below were transformed by daylight. What had seemed forbidding in the storm now revealed itself as hauntingly beautiful. Formal gardens gone wild, statuary draped in ivy, a fountain in the shape of a weeping angel at the center of a courtyard. Beyond the high stone walls, the moor stretched away in shades of purple and gray-green, empty and ancient. No sign of the Ashborn, but then they would wait for night. A knock at the door made her jump. Enter, she called, surprised by how easily she fell into the role of guest, rather than servant. Tegwin appeared, carrying a tray with bread, butter and tea that steamed in the cool air. Breakfast, miss. Lord Emrys requests your presence in Owain's room at your earliest convenience. Where is Owain's room? East wing, 3rd door on the left. I'll show you when you're ready. Ophelia ate quickly, her stomach reminding her she'd barely touched dinner. The bread was fresh and good, the butter rich and creamy. Manor fare, not the thin porridge that had been her breakfast for years. Don't get used to it, she warned herself. 2 weeks, and then gone. But as she followed Tegwin through corridors lined with portraits and tapestries, past rooms filled with ancient furniture and the scent of beeswax and thyme, part of her wondered what it might be like to stay in a place like this, to have a purpose beyond mucking out stalls and dodging her father's temper. Foolish. It's a beautiful prison, nothing more. Owain's room was smaller than hers, but no less opulent, decorated in shades of blue and silver. The boy sat propped up in bed, his dark hair tousled, his face pale but peaceful in sleep. Emrys sat in a chair beside the bed, so still he might have been a statue. He looked different in the daylight, more vulnerable somehow, the shadows beneath his eyes more pronounced, his skin almost translucent. He wore simple dark clothing, and his hair fell loose around his shoulders. When he heard her enter, his eyes opened, and she saw the effort it cost him to move. "Daylight weakens you," she observed, perceptive. His voice was softer than last. "Night, lacking some of its resonance. I can function, but my strength ebbs with the sun. By noon, I'll be forced to seek darker rooms." He gestured to Owain. "He'll wake soon. When he does, he'll need to feed." Ophelia's stomach tightened. "Feed? You mean blood?" "Yes." Emrys rose, moving slowly to a small table where a silver tray held several vials of dark liquid. "Owain doesn't hunt. He's too young, too undisciplined. I provide for him donated blood from willing servants, preserved by methods I won't burden you with." "Donated?" Ophelia moved closer, examining the vials. They looked like wine in the morning light. "People give you blood willingly?" "Some humans find our kind fascinating rather than frightening," Emrys said. "Others need money, and I pay well. And a few." He paused, something complicated crossing his features. "A few understand that there are worse monsters in the world than vampires, and they choose alliance over enmity. Like Tegwin? Like Tegwin. She's served Blackthorn since before Owain was born. Her loyalty is absolute." Owain stirred, his small face scrunching in discomfort. His hand moved to the bandage on his arm, and even from across the room, Ophelia could smell the sickly sweet scent of infection. "That's not healing properly," she said, her healer's instinct overriding her fear. She'd treated enough wounds in the stables to recognize the signs. "It's festering." Emrys's jaw tightened. "Sunlight burns are difficult for our kind. They heal slowly, and mortal medicine is largely useless. What he needs," he stopped. "What?" "Fresh blood, directly from the source. It accelerates healing in ways preserved blood cannot." Understanding dawned cold and terrible. "You want him to feed from me?" "No." The word was sharp, immediate. "I would never ask that of you, but—" Emrys moved to the window, his back to her. "I thought you should understand. If his condition worsens, if infection spreads, he may have no choice. And if I refuse, then he suffers, perhaps dies." Emrys turned, and the weight in his pale eyes was ancient and terrible. "I will not compel you, Ophelia. Not in this. Not in anything. Your body is your own, always. But I wanted you to know the stakes." Owain's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded his features, then recognition and relief. "Ophelia," he whispered. "You stayed. I said I would." She moved to his bedside, gently touching his forehead. Fever hot despite his undead nature. "How do you feel?" "It hurts." His voice was so small, so achingly young. "The burn. It won't stop hurting." Ophelia looked at the bandage, at the seepage staining the white cloth. Then at Emrys, who watched her with an expression she couldn't read. She thought of her mother, who died when Ophelia was 12. Fever had taken her, an infection from a simple cut that had spread and poisoned her blood. Ophelia had watched her waste away, helpless, knowing that if they'd had money for a proper physician, access to the manor's medicines, her mother might have lived. She'd sworn then that she would never watch someone suffer needlessly if she had the power to help them. "How does it work?" she heard herself ask. "The feeding?" Emrys went very still. "Ophelia, tell me how it works," she repeated, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I need to know what I'm agreeing to." "You don't have to do this. I know. But he's in pain, and I can help. So tell me." A long silence, broken only by Owain's labored breathing. Then Emrys moved closer, his movements careful, as if approaching a skittish animal. "The process is simple," he said quietly. "He'll bite typically the wrist or inner elbow, where veins are close to the surface. There will be pain at first, sharp but brief. Then your body releases chemicals in response to our saliva. Most humans describe it as warm, even pleasant. You'll feel weak afterward, lightheaded, but nothing dangerous if he takes only what he needs. Which is, for healing, a cup, perhaps slightly more. Nothing your body won't replenish within a day." Ophelia sat on the edge of the bed, rolling up her sleeve to expose her wrist. Her hand barely shook. "All right, Ophelia, no." Owain pushed himself up, his eyes wide with horror. "I won't hurt you. I won't." "You're not hurting me," she said gently. "I'm choosing to help you. There's a difference." "She's right." Emrys knelt beside Owain, his hand on the boy's shoulder. But only if you can control yourself. Do you understand? You must stop when I tell you to stop. Owain nodded, his gaze fixed on Ophelia's wrist with an intensity that sent ice down her spine. She could see the hunger rising in him, the way his eyes darkened, the way he leaned forward despite himself. I won't let him take too much, Emrys said to her. You have my word. Somehow, impossibly, she believed him. Ophelia held out her wrist, and Owain took it in both hands, his grip gentle despite the trembling that ran through him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he bowed his head, and she felt the scrape of teeth against her skin. The pain was sharp and bright, a white-hot lance that made her gasp. But almost immediately, warmth flooded through her, sweet and strange, like honey dissolving in tea. The pain receded, replaced by a floating sensation, as if she were drifting in warm water. She could feel it, feel her blood flowing into him, feel the pull and release, feel his small body drawing strength from hers. It should have been horrifying. Instead, it was intimate, profound in a way she couldn't name. Emrys's hand appeared in her peripheral vision, steadying her shoulder. Breathe, he murmured. Just breathe. Time became elastic. Seconds or minutes, she couldn't tell. Then Emrys spoke, firmer now. Enough, Owain. The boy pulled back immediately, his eyes clearer than before, color returning to his pale cheeks. Her blood stained his lips. And she watched, him lick it away with an expression of such guilt that her heart ached. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Ophelia's voice came from far away, thick and slow. She looked down at her wrist, at the 2 neat puncture marks already beginning to close, and felt a wave of dizziness. Did it help? Look, Emrys said quietly, gesturing to Owain's arm. The boy unwrapped the bandage with trembling fingers, revealing skin that was no longer angry red and blistered but pink and new, healing rapidly even as they watched. Within moments, the worst of the damage had faded to barely a shadow. It worked, Owain breathed, wonder in his voice. Ophelia, it worked. But Ophelia didn't respond. The warm, floating feeling had turned into a tide pulling her under. She felt Emrys catch her as she swayed, his cold arms surprisingly gentle as he lifted her. Rest now, he said, his voice coming from very far away. You were very brave. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was being laid in the rose-covered bed, a cold hand smoothing hair back from her forehead, and a voice like winter saying, Sleep, Ophelia Furch Owen. You are safe here. And impossibly, she believed him. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Moon. Ophelia woke to the smell of iron and roses. Her wrist throbbed dully, and when she touched it, she felt the raised marks beneath a fresh bandage. Memory returned in fragments. Owain's desperate hunger, the strange warmth of being fed from, Emrys's cold hands catching her as she fell. The room was darker now, late afternoon perhaps, judging by the slant of light through the windows. Someone had been here while she slept, had tended to her wound and left a tray with bread, cheese, and a glass of what looked like dark wine. To replace the blood you lost, she realized. The thought should have disturbed her more than it did. She drank the wine rich and fortifying, tasting of iron and blackberries, and ate mechanically, regaining her strength. Her body felt strange, hollowed out and filled back up with something not quite right, but stronger than she'd expected. The vampire blood must have done something to her, some effect of the exchange she didn't understand. When she finally felt steady enough to stand, she found clothing laid out, another simple dress, this one in deep green. Whoever had chosen these garments knew her size with unsettling precision. The corridors were quiet as she made her way back to Owain's room, guided by memory and the peculiar sense that the house itself was showing her the way. Foolish, but the manor seemed alive somehow, aware of its occupants. She found them in what appeared to be a study, Owain curled in a window seat with a book, Emrys at a desk covered in maps and papers. Candlelight flickered, even though sunset was still an hour away. You're awake, Owain said, his face brightening. He set aside his book and rushed to her, stopping just short of touching her, as if afraid. I wasn't too rough? I'm fine, Ophelia assured him, and was surprised to find it was true. How's your arm? He pushed up his sleeve to show her perfectly smooth skin, not even a scar remaining. Gone, all healed. Because of you. Because you needed help. She looked past him to Emrys, who'd risen from the desk. In the candlelight, he seemed more himself, less of the daylight frailty remaining. How long was I asleep? 4 hours? Not unusual after a first feeding. He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a bottle, pouring a measure of amber liquid into a glass. Drink this. It will help restore your strength. She accepted it, sniffing cautiously. What is it? Brandy infused with iron and herbs. An old recipe for blood loss. When she hesitated, he added dryly, I assure you, I have no need to poison you. If I wanted you dead, there are far simpler methods. Fair point. Ophelia drank, and the liquid burned all the way down, spreading heat through her limbs. Better? Emery's asked. Better. She set the glass aside and moved to the desk, drawn by curiosity to the maps spread there. They showed the moor, the village, and the manor, with marks and notations in a script she didn't recognize. What are you planning? Escape routes, Emery said. The Ashbourne have us surrounded, but their cordon isn't complete. There are gaps, times when they change guard or reposition. If I can time it correctly, we might slip through. Might? Nothing is certain. They're expecting us to run. He traced a line on the map with one long finger. This path leads north to my holdings near Conwy. 3 days hard ride, most of it through open country. Dangerous even without pursuit. Ophelia studied the map, her mind working. What about going south? Toward the coast? The court has strongholds there. We'd be running straight into their arms. Then east? Into England? Possible. Emery's considered, his pale eyes flicking between the map and her face. But it would mean abandoning Wales, my territory, everything I've built here. Better to abandon territory than to lose Owain, Ophelia said quietly. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. You're right, of course. But leaving would signal weakness. Other vampire houses would see opportunity, would move to claim what I leave behind. The chaos could kill more than just Owain. So you're trapped between protecting one child and protecting your people, Ophelia said. Yes. The word held centuries of weight. Welcome to leadership, where every choice costs someone something. Owain had returned to his window seat, but his attention was fixed on them, his young face troubled. I don't want people to die because of me. They won't, Emery said firmly. I won't allow it. But how? A bell rang somewhere in the manor's depths, sharp and urgent. 3 tolls, then silence. Emery's entire posture changed, becoming predatory, alert. The outer wards. Someone's testing them. The Ashbourne? Perhaps. Or worse. He moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. Outside, sunset painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. They're growing bold. Ophelia joined him at the window, following his gaze. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the gardens and the walls and the moor beyond. Then movement caught her eye. Figures at the gate. Pale forms that seemed to blur at the edges, moving with liquid grace. One of them reached out, placing a hand against the iron. And even from here, Ophelia could see the way it recoiled, smoke rising from burned flesh. Iron, she breathed. The gates are iron. Iron, rowan wood, and old magic, Emery's confirmed. They can't enter. Not without invitation. But they can wait. And they can send agents who aren't bound by the same rules. What do you mean? As if in answer, something small and dark dropped from the sky, landing in the courtyard with a wet thud. Ophelia gasped. It was a crow, but wrong, its feathers slick with something that might have been oil or blood, its eyes burning with the same coal ember glow she'd seen in the Ashbourne. A spy, Emery said grimly. They've sent a revenant. The crow's head swiveled, fixing its burning gaze on the window where they stood. Its beak opened, and a voice emerged, dry, rasping, entirely wrong for the throat producing it. Lord Emrys Carow of Blackthorn, it said, the words echoing across the courtyard. The Court of Ash summons you. Deliver the abomination you shelter, and you may keep your life and lands. Refuse, and we will reduce Blackthorn to rubble and salt the earth where it stood. Silence fell like a shroud. Abomination, Owain whispered, his voice breaking. They called me an abomination. They're wrong, Ophelia said fiercely, surprising herself with the intensity of her anger. You're a child, not a thing to be destroyed. The crow tilted its head. And who speaks? The mortal who shelters monsters? You are already doomed, girl. When we take the manor, You will die screaming alongside them. Emery's moved faster than sight, throwing open the window and hurling something small and bright. It struck the crow mid-flight as it tried to escape, and the creature exploded in a shower of black feathers and oily smoke. The stench of burning flesh filled the air. "Silver dagger," Emery said, pulling the window closed. "Blessed by a Welsh saint 3 centuries ago. Useful for such vermin." But his face was grim, and Ophelia knew why. The threat had been delivered. The terms set. "Surrender, Owain, or watch everything burn." "You can't give me to them," Owain said, his voice steadier now, almost adult. "I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. I'm not surrendering you to anyone," Emery said flatly. "We find another way." "What other way?" Owain's hands clenched into fists. "They'll destroy the manor, kill the servants, hunt anyone who's helped us." His gaze slid to Ophelia. "Kill her. All because I was born wrong." "You weren't born wrong," Ophelia insisted. "The court is wrong. There's a difference." "Is there?" Owain's eyes were too old, too knowing. "Maybe they're right. Maybe something like me shouldn't exist. Half and half, belonging nowhere." "Stop." Emery's knelt before the boy, his hands gripping Owain's shoulders. "Listen to me. Your father was the finest man I ever knew, vampire or mortal. And your mother," his voice caught. "Your mother loved you enough to die bringing you into this world. You are not a mistake. You are not an abomination. You are their legacy, and I will defend it with every breath I no longer draw." Tears tracked down Owain's pale cheeks, and he threw his arms around Emery's neck, sobbing. The ancient vampire held him, one hand cradling the back of his head, whispering words in Welsh too soft for Ophelia to hear. She looked away, giving them privacy, and found herself staring at the maps again. 3 days to Conwy, 3 days of running with hunters at their heels and a child who couldn't bear sunlight. Impossible. Unless... "What if we didn't run?" she said slowly. Both vampires looked at her. "What if we fought?" Ophelia continued, the idea taking shape even as she spoke. "You said the court expects you to flee. What if we gave them a different surprise? Fight an army of Ashbourne with one vampire, one child, and a handful of servants?" Emery shook his head. "That's not bravery, Ophelia. That's suicide." "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only move they won't see coming." She pointed to the map. "This is your territory, your home. You know every corridor, every passage, every weakness and strength. They don't. True, but... And you have something they want desperately," Ophelia pressed. "Owain. Which means they'll try to take him alive, or at least intact enough to present to the court. That makes them cautious. Predictable." Emery studied her with new interest. "You're suggesting we use Owain as bait?" "No," Owain said immediately. "Absolutely not. Not as bait," Ophelia corrected. "As leverage. They want him too badly to risk killing him by accident. That gives us an advantage." "Or it gets us all killed," Emery said, but she could see the calculations running behind his eyes. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ophelia looked between them, the ancient vampire lord and the hunted child, and took a breath. "I don't know yet, but I know running will get you killed. They're faster, stronger, and they don't need to sleep. They'll run you down within a day." She met Emery's pale gaze. "You need to make them come to you. On ground you choose, with traps you set. And you think you can help with that?" His tone wasn't mocking but genuinely curious. "You're a stable girl, not a strategist. I'm someone who's spent her life outthinking horses 10 times her size and strength." Ophelia shot back. "You use intelligence when you don't have power. You use terrain when you don't have numbers. And you use your enemy's expectations against them." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of candle flame and the distant howl of wind across the moor. Finally, Emery smiled a real smile, sharp and dangerous and alive. "You're either brilliant or insane. Can't I be both?" "Apparently." He turned back to the desk, pulling out fresh paper. "All right, Ophelia Furch Owen, show me how a stable girl wages war against immortals." And as night fell over Blackthorn Manor, the three of them bent over maps and began to plan. Chapter 5. Blood Bonds and Breaking Points. They worked through the night. Ophelia had never felt less tired. Energy hummed through her veins, sharp and strange, and she wondered if it was an after effect of the feeding, if Owain's vampire blood had somehow changed her, made her more than she'd been. Or maybe, she thought, watching Emrys trace defensive positions on the map with fluid precision. Maybe it's just purpose. Maybe it's mattering. They'd identified 3 potential choke points in the manor where attackers could be funneled and ambushed. Emrys knew hidden passages that honeycomb the walls, escape routes, and spy holes built by paranoid lords centuries past. Tegwin, when summoned, had contributed knowledge of the servants' paths and the manor's supply stores. Silver, the old woman had said, ticking items off on weathered fingers. Blessed weapons. Holy water from St. Buno's well, ancient, but still potent. And iron, of course. Enough to make any vampire think twice. How many servants remain in the manor? Ophelia had asked. 14, miss. Not counting myself. Most are mortal, though 3 are Dhampir half-blood, like young Owain, but born to turned vampires rather than pure bloodlines. Can they fight? Tegwin's smile had been grim. They've served Blackthorn through 3 wars, 2 plagues, and the collapse of 4 vampire houses. They can fight. Now, as dawn approached, Ophelia stood at the window of the study, watching the sky lighten from black to gray. The Ashbourne had withdrawn with the night, but she could feel them out there, watching, waiting. You should rest, Emrys said from behind her. She hadn't heard him move, but his reflection appeared in the window glass pale and insubstantial, like a ghost. You've been awake for nearly 20 hours. So have you. I don't need sleep the way you do, especially not when dawn comes. Already, she could see the strain in his face, the way he moved more carefully as the sky brightened. Ophelia turned to face him. How bad does it get? The daylight? Imagine carrying twice your weight while breathing through cloth, Emrys said. Everything becomes muffled, distant. My strength bleeds away until I'm barely more capable than a mortal man. But you don't die. No. Not from sunlight alone. But I become vulnerable. He moved to the desk, extinguishing candles with pinched fingers. Which is why Owain needs you during the day. Why all of this depends on you. The weight of Tom. Responsibility settled heavier on Ophelia's shoulders. What if I fail? Then we all die, and the Ashbourne win. He said it without drama, just fact. Then, softer. But I don't think you'll fail, Ophelia Furch Owen. Why not? Because you're still here. Emrys met her eyes, and in the growing dawn light, his seemed almost human, touched with warmth that didn't belong in an immortal's gaze. You could have run a dozen times. Should have. But you stayed for Owain, and now you're planning a defense of a place that isn't yours, for people who aren't your kind. That speaks to who you are. Or it speaks to my stupidity. Perhaps. A smile ghosted across his lips. But I've lived 8 centuries, Ophelia. I've known thousands of humans, brilliant and foolish, brave and craven. And I'm telling you, you're remarkable. Heat crept up her neck, and she looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity of his regard. You barely know me. I know you risked your life for a child in a storm. I know you offered your blood to heal him. I know you're planning to fight vampires with nothing but intelligence and courage. Emrys moved closer, and she caught his scent, cold stone and old paper, and something indefinably other. I know enough. The moment stretched between them, strange and charged. Then Owain's voice called from the doorway, breaking the spell. Emrys, the sun's almost up. You need to go to your chamber. Yes. Emrys stepped back, and Ophelia felt the distance like a loss. Owain will stay with you during the day. The servants know to follow your orders regarding the defense preparations. If the Ashbourne attack before sunset, I'll handle it, Ophelia said with more confidence than she felt. I know you will. He moved to the door, pausing beside Owain to rest a hand on the boy's head. Protect each other. We will, Owain promised. Then Emrys was gone, retreating to whatever dark place he spent the daylight hours. Ophelia felt his absence like a cold draft, and realized with some surprise that she'd grown accustomed to his presence, to the quiet strength that radiated from him. Dangerous, she thought, getting attached to monsters. He likes you, Owain said, watching her with knowing eyes. Don't be ridiculous. I've lived with him for 6 years. I know his faces, his moods. The boy moved to the window seat, curling up with the unself-conscious grace of a cat. He's different with you. Softer. He's protective of his assets, Ophelia said. I'm useful to him, nothing more. If you say so. But Owain's smile suggested he didn't believe her. The day passed in organized chaos. Ophelia found herself coordinating with Tegwin and the other servants, ensuring weapons were distributed, defenses prepared. The Dhampir, 2 women and a man, all of them eerily beautiful with the same pale skin and dark eyes as Owain took charge of setting traps in the corridors. "Silver wire here," one of them explained, stringing nearly invisible thread across a passageway. "It won't kill them, but it will slow them down, burn them enough that they'll think twice about pursuit." Ophelia helped where she could, her stable girl strength proving useful for hauling crates of weapons and moving furniture to create barricades. By noon, her muscles ached and sweat soaked her dress despite the manor's chill. Owain stayed close, his earlier energy fading as the sun reached its zenith. By early afternoon, he was pale and listless, curled in a chair near the fireplace while Ophelia worked. "How do you bear it?" he asked suddenly. "Being mortal? Knowing you'll die?" Ophelia set down the iron poker she'd been sharpening and moved to sit beside him. "I don't think about it much, too busy living to worry about dying. But doesn't it frighten you? That one day, you'll just stop?" "Sometimes," she admitted, "but everyone I've ever loved has been mortal. My mother, my friends. Dying is just part of the pattern, part of being human. I wish I could die," Owain whispered, "just to stop being the thing everyone wants dead." Ophelia's heart cracked. She pulled him close, this strange child who was both younger and older than his years. "Listen to me. Your life matters. Not because of what you are, but because of who you are. You're kind and brave, and you care about people, mortal and vampire both. The world needs more of that, not less. The court doesn't think so. The court is wrong." She tilted his chin up, making him meet her eyes. "And we're going to prove it by surviving this. By showing them that you deserve to exist, to grow, to have a future." Owain's arms tightened around her waist. "I'm glad you're here, Ophelia. Even if we die, I'm glad I met you." "We're not dying," she said firmly. "We're fighting, and we're going to win." But even as she spoke the words, she heard a sound that turned her blood to ice. The bell tolling again. Not 3 times, but continuously. A frantic warning. "They're coming." Ophelia ran to the window and saw them, dozens of pale figures swarming over the walls, moving with inhuman speed despite the afternoon sun. The Ashbourne had abandoned caution, had decided the sun's weakness was worth the price of entry. "Get Emery's," she barked at Owain. "Now." "But the sun, now." Owain fled, and Ophelia grabbed the iron poker she'd been sharpening, her heart hammering. Through the window, she watched the Ashbourne spread through the grounds like a plague, moving toward the manor's entrances. Tegwin burst into the room, a crossbow in her weathered hands. "They've breached the outer walls. The Dhampir are holding the main entrance, but there are too many." "How long until sunset?" 3 hours, miss. Maybe 4. Too long. Far too long." Ophelia's mind raced, sifting through their preparations, their plans. They'd anticipated a night attack, when Emery's would be at full strength. This was chaos. "Fall back to the inner keep," she decided. "Barricade everything. Make them come to us slowly. And Lord Emery's will have to fight weakened, or we'll all die waiting." Footsteps thundered in the corridor, and Emery's appeared, Owain at his heels. Even in the dimmer light of the interior, Ophelia could see how the daylight had drained him, his skin ashen, his movements careful, as if his body had become something he couldn't quite trust. "They've committed," he said, his voice rough. "The Ashbourne value Owain more than I anticipated. They're willing to sacrifice half their force to Sunburn if it means taking him today." "Can you fight?" Ophelia asked. "I can die defending him, if nothing else." Emery's moved to the weapons rack, selecting a sword that looked ancient and deadly. "But I'd prefer to take as many of them with me as possible." A crash echoed from below, wood splintering, glass shattering. Screams followed, cut short. "They're inside," Tegwin said grimly. Emery's looked at Ophelia, and in his eyes she saw resignation and regret. "Get Owain to the north tower. There's a passage that leads to the crypt holy ground, where they can't follow. You can hold out there until sunset." "And you?" "I'll buy you time." "No." The word burst from Ophelia before she could think. "No, we fight together or not at all." "Don't be foolish." "I'm not being foolish, I'm being strategic." Ophelia grabbed a crossbow from the rack, her hand steadier than she felt. "If you die, Owain loses his protector. If I die, he loses his daylight guardian. We need each other." Emery stared at her, something complicated moving in his expression. Then, incredibly, he laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You're either the bravest or most stubborn woman I've ever met. Both, Ophelia said. Now let's go kill some vampires. They moved as a unit through the corridors, Emrys leading despite his weakness, Ophelia and Owain flanked by Tegwin and 2 Dhampir. The sounds of battle grew louder, shouts, screams, the clash of metal on metal. The first Ashborn they encountered died quickly, Emrys's blade taking its head before it could react. But the second was faster, and it took all 3 Dhampir to bring it down. Sunlight streaming through a shattered window caught it as it fell, and Ophelia watched in horror as smoke rose from its exposed skin, flesh blackening and cracking. They're burning themselves to get to us, Tegwin muttered. Madness, desperation, Emrys corrected. They know that if they don't take Owain now, during my weakness, they may never get another chance. They fought their way to the inner keep, leaving bodies in their wake. Ophelia fired her crossbow twice, both shots finding their marks, not killing blows, but enough to slow the Ashborn, to give the Dhampir time to finish them. But for every enemy they dropped, 2 more appeared. We can't hold. One of the Dhampir gasped, bleeding from a dozen wounds. There are too many. An explosion rocked the manor, shaking stone and sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Ophelia staggered, catching herself against the wall. Through a window, she saw flames rising from the east wing. They're burning us out, Emrys said, his voice hollow. Owain clutched at Ophelia's hand, his small face set in lines of terrible determination. Then I go to them. I surrender. It's the only way. No, Ophelia began, but the boy pulled free, running toward the main entrance before anyone could stop him. Emrys lunged after him, and Ophelia followed, her heart in her throat. They burst into the grand entrance hall to find it transformed into a battlefield. Bodies littered the floor, servants, Dhampir, Ashborn, and at the center, standing calm amid the chaos, was a figure that made even Emrys falter. She was beautiful and terrible, pale as bone, with hair like spilled ink and eyes that burned like embers. She wore armor of silver and black, and power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Lord Emrys, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly over the sounds of battle. The Court of Ash sends its regards. Lady Aelwyn, Emrys replied, his hand tight on his sword. I should have known they'd send their best assassin. Not assassin, executioner. Aelwyn's gaze slid to Owain, and her smile was cruel. Hello, little abomination. I've heard so much about you. Don't touch him, Ophelia heard herself say. Stepping between Owain and the vampire lady, Aelwyn's attention shifted, and Ophelia felt the weight of that ancient stare like a physical blow. And what is this? The mortal pet who thinks she can protect our kind? She laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. How delightfully tragic. Ophelia, get back, Emrys ordered. But Ophelia didn't move, couldn't move, because she'd just seen the way Aelwyn's fingers traced patterns in the air, the way reality seemed to ripple around her. She's a blood witch, Ophelia breathed. That's how they got through your wards. Emrys's face went stone cold. That's impossible. Blood witches are extinct, clearly not, Aelwyn purred. The court has resources you never imagined, Emrys. And now, those resources will be your end. She moved her hand, and Emrys dropped to his knees, his sword clattering to the floor. Blood began to seep from his nose, his ears. Stop, Owain screamed. Stop hurting him. Give yourself to me, Aelwyn said, and I'll let him live. Refuse, and I'll tear him apart from the inside out. Ophelia's mind raced. Blood witch, blood magic, which meant, without thinking, she grabbed the iron poker from her belt and slashed it across her own palm. Blood welled, hot and red, and she stepped forward, holding out her hand. You want blood? She said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Take mine. And she threw her blood at Aelwyn's face. The effect was instantaneous. Aelwyn screamed, clawing at her eyes, her skin smoking where Ophelia's blood had touched it. The spell on Emrys shattered, and he surged to his feet, his sword flashing. But Ophelia wasn't done. She'd seen enough in her brief time at Blackthorn to understand something fundamental. Blood called to blood, and if Aelwyn was a blood witch, then maybe. She pressed her bleeding hand to Owain's mouth. Drink, she commanded. Just a drop. Trust me. Owain's eyes went wide, but he obeyed. And the moment her blood touched his tongue, Ophelia felt it, a connection snapping into place, a bond forging between them. Through that bond, she felt his power, and more importantly, she felt how to use it. Now, she gasped. Together. They didn't have words for what happened next. Only that Ophelia's blood and Owain's vampire nature combined in a way that made the air itself scream. Light burst from them both, not sunlight, but something stranger, older. A radiance that predated vampires and mortals, and the war between them. Aelwyn shrieked and fled, dissolving into shadow. The remaining Ashborn followed, their nerve broken by whatever they'd just witnessed. Then silence. Fell, broken only by the crackle of flames and the gasping breath of survivors. Ophelia collapsed, her hand still bleeding, her body suddenly weightless. She felt Emrys catch her again, always catching her when she fell and lower her gently to the floor. "What did you do?" he whispered, wonder in his voice. "I don't know," Ophelia admitted, "but I think I just bonded myself to your world." And as consciousness faded, the last thing she saw was Emrys's face above hers, his expression a mix of awe and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like hope. Chapter 6. The Price of Power. Ophelia woke to darkness and the scent of earth. For a moment, panic clawed at her throat, buried alive, trapped, dying. Then her vision adjusted, and she realized she was in a chamber, not a grave. Stone walls curved around her, lit by a single candle that guttered on a nearby shelf. The air was cool and still, undisturbed by any wind. The crypt. They'd brought her to the crypt. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her skull, and her bleeding hand throbbed with a deep, bone-aching pulse. When she looked down, she found it bandaged in clean linen, but blood had already seeped through. "Careful." Emrys's voice came from the shadows, and then he was there, kneeling beside the stone bench where she lay. "You lost a great deal of blood. First to Owain, then to your display." "Display?" Ophelia repeated, her voice hoarse. "Is that what we're calling it? I don't have another word for what you did." He looked different in the candlelight, less ancient, more human, though the illusion shattered when she met his pale eyes. "You bonded with Owain through blood, created a connection that should be impossible between mortal and vampire, and then you channeled his power as if you'd been trained for decades." Memory returned in fragments, the feeling of Owain's strength flowing through her, the light that had burst from them both. Aelwyn's screams. "Did it work?" she asked. "Did they leave?" "For now." Aelwyn retreated with the surviving Ashborn at sunset. "They've pulled back beyond the walls, but they're not gone, merely regrouping." Emrys's hand hovered near her face, not quite touching. "You terrified them, Ophelia. They've never seen a mortal channel vampire power before." "Neither have I." She managed to sit up properly, ignoring the spinning in her head. "How long was I unconscious?" 6 hours. It's past midnight now." He paused. "Owain has been beside himself with worry. He blames himself for what happened to you. It wasn't his fault. I chose to." She stopped. "Wait. What exactly happened to me?" Emrys's expression grew grave. "The bond you forged. It changed you. Not drastically. Not enough to make you anything other than human, but enough that you now carry a trace of vampire nature in your blood. You'll heal faster than before. Be stronger. Live longer. Perhaps significantly. Longer. How long? I don't know. This has never happened before." He finally touched her then, his cold fingers gentle against her cheek. "You may have given yourself decades, even centuries, of additional life, or the strain may kill you within months. There's no precedent, no way to predict." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. She'd changed herself, permanently, irrevocably, for a child she'd known less than 3 days. "Would you have stopped me?" she asked. "If you'd known? Yes. No hesitation. But I'm also grateful you didn't give me the chance." A sound at the crypt's entrance made them both turn. Owain stood there, his small face pale and drawn, dark circles shadowing his eyes. When he saw Ophelia awake, relief and guilt warred in his expression. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Come here," Ophelia said, opening her arms. He flew to her, burying his face against her shoulder, and she held him while he sobbed deep, wrenching sounds that shook his small frame. "It's my fault," he choked out. "You're hurt because of me. Changed because of me. I chose this," Ophelia said firmly. "Do you understand? I chose to help you, to protect you. That's not your fault, it's my decision. But you didn't know." "No, I didn't. But I'd do it again. She pulled back to look at him, to make sure he heard her. You're worth protecting, Owain. Worth fighting for. Worth whatever price I have to pay. She's right, Emery said quietly. He'd moved to the crypt's small window, looking out at the night. And now that price has bought us something valuable. What? Ophelia asked. Fear. Uncertainty. The Ashbourne came here expecting an easy kill, a frightened child and a weakened protector. Instead, they found a mortal who can channel vampire power and a bond that shouldn't exist. He turned back to them, and in the candlelight, his smile was sharp and satisfied. We've become unpredictable, dangerous. That buys us time. Time for what? To finish what you started, to plan our true defense. Emery's moved to an ancient chest in the corner of the crypt, opening it to reveal scrolls and books bound in leather so old it had gone black with age. If you can bond with Owain, channel his power, then perhaps others can as well. The Dhampir, trusted servants. We could create a force that combines mortal flexibility with vampire strength. You want to make more of whatever I am? Ophelia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. I want to give us a chance to survive. Emery's pulled out a scroll, unfurling it to reveal diagrams and text in that same unfamiliar script. These are the archives of the Blackthorn line, records going back 1,500 years. If anyone has encountered this before, it will be documented here. And if they haven't, then we improvise. His pale gaze found hers. As you did today. Ophelia looked between Emery's and Owain, at the ancient vampire and the hunted child, and felt the weight of Cly's choice settling on her shoulders again. She could refuse, could retreat to simple protection and let Emery's handle the larger strategy, could keep her humanity separate from their immortal conflicts. Or she could commit fully, could embrace this strange new thing she'd become, could fight with every weapon she possessed. Show me the archives, she said. Teach me what you know. If I'm going to be some kind of vampire-touched warrior, I should at least understand what that means. Emery's expression softened into something that looked like respect. As you wish. They spent the next hours in the crypt, poring over ancient texts while Owain dozed in a corner. Ophelia learned things that made her head spin. The true history of vampires, arising not from curses but from a plague that swept through Europe 2 millennia ago. The way blood carried memory, so that every vampire who fed gained fragments of their victims' experiences. The secret hierarchies and blood feuds that had shaped European politics for centuries. And most importantly, she learned about blood bonds. They're meant to be formed between vampire and willing servant, Emery's explained, his finger tracing diagrams in a grimoire. The servant offers their blood regularly, gaining strength and longevity in return for loyalty and service. But those bonds are controlled, measured, limited by the vampire's will. And what I did wasn't? What you did was raw and instinctive. You forced a connection without training, without control, without understanding the cost. He looked up from the book. You should have died. The strain alone should have stopped your heart. But it didn't. No. Which means you have some natural affinity for this, some quality that makes you resistant to the dangers. His voice dropped. Or some quality that makes the bond want to take root in you. That sounds ominous. It is. Emery's closed the book carefully. Blood bonds can deepen over time, become permanent. The servant becomes something between mortal and vampire, stronger, longer lived, but increasingly dependent on their bonded vampire's blood. Eventually, the line between them blurs until what? Until they're no longer truly separate beings. He met her eyes. The servant lives as long as the vampire does, shares their power, but loses the ability to exist independently. It's a form of immortality, but at the cost of autonomy. Ophelia's stomach tightened. Are you saying I could become bound to Owain permanently? Or he could become bound to you? The direction isn't always predictable, especially with a bond as unusual as yours. Emery's hand closed over hers, careful of the bandages. I won't lie to you, Ophelia. This path you've chosen, it's dangerous. You could gain centuries of life, or you could lose your humanity entirely. And once a bond begins to deepen, it's nearly impossible to break without killing one or both parties. So I'm trapped. You're committed, he said, it without judgment. The choice was made the moment your blood touched his tongue. Now we simply have to navigate the consequences. Ophelia pulled her hand free, standing to pace the small crypt. The candle had burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Through the narrow window, she could see the first hint of dawn graying the eastern sky. "What about the Ashbourne?" she asked. "If they know about the bond, won't they use it against us?" "Possibly. But they don't understand it any better than we do. That ignorance is a weapon." Emrys rose, moving to stand beside her at the window. "They expected you to be a simple mortal, easily killed or frightened. Instead, you're something they've never encountered. That makes you valuable in ways beyond just protecting Owain. You want to use me as a deterrent. I want to use every advantage we have to keep that child alive." His voice was tired, ancient, carrying the weight of centuries, "including you. If you're willing." Ophelia watched the sky lighten, thinking of her father who'd barely noticed when she left, of the stables that had been her prison, of the life that had felt so small and meaningless, and she thought of Owain, curled sleeping in the corner, his young face peaceful in rest, despite everything hunting him. "I'm willing," she said quietly. "But I have conditions. Name them. First, you teach me everything. About vampires, about blood bonds, about how to fight and survive in this world. I won't be useful if I'm ignorant." "Agreed." "Second, you don't hide things from me. No more secrets about what the bond might do to me, what risks we're taking. I need to know what I'm facing." "Also agreed." "Third," she turned to face him fully. "You tell me the truth about something. When you look at me, what do you see? A tool, a weapon, or something else?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them had acknowledged until now. Emrys studied her for a long moment, and in the growing dawn light, his features seemed almost human, almost vulnerable. "I see," he said slowly. "Someone who reminds me why I chose to protect rather than prey. Why I built Blackthorn as a sanctuary instead of a fortress. Why, after 8 centuries of existence, I still believe some things are worth fighting for." His hand rose, fingertips brushing her cheek. "I see someone who makes me remember what it felt like to be human." Ophelia's breath caught. The cold of his touch should have repelled her. Instead, she found herself leaning into it, into the ancient stillness that radiated from him. "That's dangerous," she whispered. "Yes." He didn't move away. "For both of us." Emrys. The moment shattered as Tegwin's footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond. The old woman appeared in the doorway, her face grim. "My lord, the Ashbourne have sent another messenger. They demand parley." Emrys's expression shuddered, becoming remote and lordly once more. But his eyes held Ophelia's for one more heartbeat, and in them, she saw promise and warning tangled together. "Very well," he said. "Let them come. It's time we set our own terms." And as the sun rose over Blackthorn Manor, Ophelia felt the weight of her new reality settling over her. Bound to a vampire child, drawn to an ancient lord, caught in a war she barely understood, but also alive, purposeful, necessary. She'd been reborn in blood and fire, and there was no going back. Only forward, into whatever darkness waited. Chapter 7. The Parley. They met at noon, when the sun reached its zenith and vampires were at their weakest. Ophelia stood on the manor's front steps flanked by Emrys and Owain, with Tegwin and the surviving Dhampir arranged behind them. The servants had cleaned as much as possible removed bodies, washed away blood, but the scars of battle remained visible in broken windows and scorched stone. Beyond the gates, the Ashbourne waited, dozens of them, arranged in precise ranks like a military force. And at their head, Lady Aylwyn stood tall and terrible, her burns from Ophelia's blood healed to faint silver scars that webbed across her perfect face. "She looks angry," Owain whispered, pressing close to Ophelia's side. "Good," Ophelia murmured back. "Angry people make mistakes." Emrys said nothing, but she felt the tension radiating from him. The daylight had drained him again, leaving him pale and careful in his movements. If fighting began now, he would be at a severe disadvantage. That's why they chose noon, Ophelia realized. They want us to know they could attack, could overwhelm us while he's weak. They're demonstrating power. "Lord Emrys," Aylwyn called, her voice carrying across the distance. "The Court of Ash offers terms." "The court has no authority here," Emrys replied, his voice steady despite his weakness. "Blackthorn is sovereign territory, recognized by covenant and blood oath. You have no right to demand anything from me. That covenant was made when you day. We're merely protecting the last vampire child," Aylwyn countered. It does not extend to abominations born of forbidden unions. Owain is under my protection. That is all the authority I need. Then you choose war? Eowyn's hand moved to the sword at her hip. The court gave you the opportunity to surrender the child and retain your holdings. You refused. Now the price is higher. How much higher? Ophelia found herself asking, her voice surprising her with its steadiness. Eowyn's attention shifted to her, and those ember eyes burned with hatred. The mortal speaks. How charming. She took a step forward. What are you, girl? What unnatural thing did you make yourself into? Does it matter? Ophelia countered. You're frightened of it. I can see that from here. A ripple of tension went through the Ashbourne ranks. Emrys's hand found hers, his cold fingers squeezing in warning, but she didn't back down. You came here expecting an easy kill, Ophelia continued, her voice growing. Stronger. A child and a weakened lord. Instead, you found something you didn't understand, and now you're trying to regain control by making threats and demands. She smiled, thin and sharp. But you're still frightened, still uncertain. You know nothing of fear, Eowyn hissed. I'm mortal. I know everything about fear. Ophelia took a step forward, down onto the gravel path. Emrys's hand fell away, and she felt his surprise, his concern, but she kept moving. I know what it's like to be powerless, to face enemies stronger and faster and more deadly than me, but I also know what it's like to fight anyway, to choose courage over safety. She stopped 10 paces from the gate, close enough that she could see the silver scars on Eowyn's face in detail, could smell the ancient power radiating from the assembled Ashbourne. So here are my terms, Ophelia said. You leave. Now. Take your army and return to the court. Tell them Blackthorn stands, and Owain remains under Lord Emrys's protection. Do this, and we'll consider the matter settled. Silence fell like snow. Then Eowyn laughed a sound like breaking crystal. Your terms? You offer terms? She moved closer to the gate, and Ophelia saw the way her hands trembled with barely controlled rage. You are nothing. A mortal insect who has lived perhaps 20 summers. I have walked this earth for 6 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have drunk the blood of kings and queens. And you presume to dictate terms to me? Yes, Ophelia said simply. Because I have something you want, and you can't take it without paying a price you're unwilling to pay. We could storm these walls in minutes. And lose how many Ashbourne? A dozen? 2 dozen? Ophelia gestured to the manor behind her. This is Lord Emrys's territory. He knows every stone, every passage, every advantage. And now he has me. Has Owain. Has a bond that can channel power in ways you don't understand and can't predict. She leaned forward, slightly. How many of your people are you willing to sacrifice, Lady Eowyn? Because I promise you we'll make you pay for every inch you take. Another silence, this one crackling with tension. Ophelia could feel Emrys's presence behind her like a cold wind, could feel Owain's fear and hope tangled together, could feel the weight of the moment balancing on a knife's edge. Then a new voice spoke deep and resonant, carrying authority that made even Eowyn straighten. Perhaps, the voice said, we should consider an alternative. A figure emerged from the Ashbourne ranks, and Ophelia's breath caught. He was beautiful in the way of very old vampires, ageless features, dark hair silvered at the temples, eyes like storm clouds. Power radiated from him in waves, and she knew without being told that this was no common Ashbourne warrior. Lord Idris, Emrys said, and Ophelia heard wariness in his voice. I didn't realize the court was sending its high executioner. The court takes the matter of vampire children seriously, Idris replied. He moved with liquid grace to stand beside Eowyn, and the contrast was stark, her barely controlled fury against his cold calculation. Lord Emrys, I have no quarrel with you. Your service to our kind is recognized and valued. But this child, his gaze slid to Owain, represents a threat we cannot ignore. He's 6 years old, Ophelia said flatly, and in 6 more, he'll be 12. In 60, 66, growing, changing, becoming something we cannot control or predict. Idris's expression remained neutral, but his words carried weight. Vampire children age until they reach maturity, then stop. By then, they are neither truly vampire nor truly mortal. They are other. And the last time one was allowed to reach adulthood, it took 3 centuries and the destruction of 5 houses to stop the chaos that followed. That was different, Emrys began. Was it? Idris interrupted. Or are you willing to gamble the stability of our entire society on the hope that this child will be different? I'll make him different, Emery said, his voice hard. I'll teach him control, discipline, respect for both mortal and vampire life. He doesn't have to become a monster. Perhaps not. But can you guarantee it? Idris's gaze shifted to Ophelia, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. And what of this mortal? This bonded one? What guarantee do we have that her connection to the child won't create new complications? I'm standing right here, Ophelia said. You can ask me directly. A slight smile touched Idris's lips. Fair enough. Tell me, mortal, what do you want? Why fight for a vampire child you barely know? The question was more complex than it seemed, layered with implications. Ophelia took a breath, choosing her words carefully. I want Owain to have the chance to grow up, she said. To decide for himself what kind of person he'll become. You're sentencing him to death for crimes he hasn't committed, for dangers he might never pose. That's not justice. That's fear. Fear has kept our kind hidden for 2 millennia. Idris replied. Fear is wisdom. Fear is also cowardice. Ophelia met his storm-cloud eyes without flinching. You're so afraid of what Owain might become that you'd kill a child. What does that say about you? For the first time, something flickered in Idris's expression, not anger but consideration. He looked back at Emery's. You've chosen your champion well, he said. She has courage, if not sense. She has both, Emery said quietly. And she's right. Killing Owain solves nothing except appeasing the court's paranoia. Then what do you propose? Idris asked. The court will not simply forget this exists. They will not allow a vampire child to live and grow without oversight. Then provide oversight. Emery's descended the steps, moving to stand beside Ophelia. Despite his daylight weakness, he projected authority. Send a representative to Blackthorn, someone to monitor Owain's development, to report to the court, to ensure he's being properly raised. Give yourselves the information you need to make an informed decision about his future. A hostage situation in reverse, Idris mused. Interesting. A partnership, Emery's corrected. One that acknowledges both the court's concerns and Owain's right to exist. Idris was silent for a long moment, his ancient gaze moving between Emery's, Ophelia, and Owain. Then he turned to Aylwin. Your opinion, Lady Aylwin? You've led this force. You've bled for this mission. Aylwin's face was a mask of fury. The child should die. The mortal should die. And Lord Emery should be stripped of his holdings for harboring an abomination. I didn't ask for your vengeance, Idris said calmly. I asked for your strategic assessment. Can Blackthorn be taken without unacceptable losses? A muscle ticked in Aylwin's jaw. The mortal's display yesterday. It changed the calculation. We can overwhelm them, but the cost would be significant. 24 Ashbourne, perhaps more. And there's no guarantee we'd capture the child alive. Then Lord Emery's proposal has merit. Idris turned back to them. I will present this option to the court. Blackthorn accepts a court-appointed observer who will reside in the manor and report on the child's development. In return, the child lives, and Lord Emery's retains his holdings and authority. And if we refuse? Emery's asked. Then we continue this conflict until one side is destroyed. Idris's voice was matter-of-fact. I have no desire for that outcome, but I will pursue it if necessary. Ophelia felt Emery's hand find hers again, cold fingers threading through warm ones. She squeezed gently, offering support. One condition, Emery said. The observer cannot interfere with Owain's daily life or training. They watch and report, nothing more. Acceptable. Idris inclined his head. I will convey your counter-proposal to the court. You have until the next new moon 14 days to prepare for your observer's arrival. And until then? Ophelia asked. What guarantee do we have you won't attack? You have my word, Idris said simply. And in 8 centuries of existence, I have never broken an oath. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Lord Emery's. The mortal who fights for you, she is remarkable. But blood bonds are dangerous, unpredictable. I would counsel caution in how deep you allow that connection to grow. Your concern is noted, Emery said, his voice carefully neutral. Idris smiled a slight, knowing expression. I'm certain it is. Then he was moving, gathering the Ashbourne with a gesture. Within moments they were withdrawing, flowing back across the moor like a retreating tide. Aylwin was the last to leave. She stood at the edge of the grounds, staring at Ophelia with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over," she called. "One day, mortal, you'll face me without your vampire protectors. And then we'll see how brave you truly are." "I look forward to it," Ophelia said, and meant it. Then they were gone, and she was sagging against Emery's, her legs suddenly weak, her hands trembling with released tension. He caught her, always catching her, and his arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright. "You did it," Owain breathed, running down the steps to throw his arms around both of them. "Ophelia, you did it. You made them leave." "We made them leave," Ophelia corrected, her hand finding his dark hair. "All of us together." 14 days, Emery said quietly, his breath cold against her ear. 14 days before the court's observer arrives, before our lives are forever changed. "Is that good or bad?" Ophelia asked. "I don't know yet." He was silent for a moment, then added, softer, "But I'm grateful you'll be here to help me find out." And as they stood there on the steps of Blackthorn Manor, vampire lord, mortal girl, and hunted child Ophelia felt something shift inside her. A sense of belonging, of purpose, of rightness that she'd never experienced in her old life. She'd found her place in this strange, dark world, and she wasn't letting go. Chapter 8, The Promise of Dawn. The next days passed in a strange, suspended peace. The Ashbourne had withdrawn beyond the moor, but their presence was felt like a weight on the horizon, watching, waiting. Ophelia found herself checking the windows compulsively, half expecting to see pale figures emerging from the darkness despite Idris's oath. But they didn't come. Instead, Blackthorn settled into a routine shaped by anticipation. The servants repaired damage from the battle, replacing shattered windows and scrubbing blood from stone. Emery spent hours in the library, researching blood bonds and vampire children with an intensity that bordered on obsession. And Owain shadowed Ophelia through her days, his small presence a constant reminder of what they'd fought for. On the third day after the parley, Emery's summoned her to the manor's training hall. Ophelia had never been in this part of Blackthorn before. The room was vast and stark, with weapons lining the walls and practice dummies arranged in rows. Windows set high in the ceiling let in diffused daylight, enough to see by but not enough to seriously weaken a vampire. Emery stood in the center of the space, dressed in simple dark clothing, 2 wooden practice swords in his hands. He looked tired, the constant vigilance taking its toll even on his ancient endurance. "You wanted to learn to fight?" he said without preamble, tossing her one of the wooden swords. "Now's your chance." Ophelia caught it awkwardly. She'd never held a sword before, even a practice one. "Shouldn't we start with something smaller? A knife, maybe?" "Knives require you to get close. Against vampires, close quarters mean death." He moved into a ready stance, the sword held with casual expertise. "You need reach, distance, the ability to keep an enemy at bay while you find their weaknesses. And you're going to teach me this? Who better?" A slight smile touched his lips. "I've been practicing sword work for 8 centuries. I may have picked up a thing or two." They began slowly, Emery's demonstrating basic guards and strikes, while Ophelia tried to mirror his movements. Her stable girl strength served her well. She could handle the sword's weight without struggling, but her form was clumsy, unrefined. "You're too stiff," Emery said, circling her. "Fighting isn't about force, it's about flow. Think of it like dancing." "I've never danced." "Then we'll have to fix that too." He moved behind her, his cold hands adjusting her grip on the sword. "Here, feel how the balance shifts? The blade is an extension of your arm, not a separate thing." His touch was careful, professional. But Ophelia felt the intimacy of it nonetheless, the way his hands lingered, the way his breath, cool and unnecessary, ghosted against her neck. She tried to focus on the ghosted lesson, but awareness of his proximity made her skin prickle. "Again," Emery said, stepping back. "Strike toward the dummy." She did, and this time the blow landed solidly, the wooden blade connecting with a satisfying thunk. Better. Again. They worked for over an hour, until Ophelia's muscles burned and sweat soaked her dress. Emery's was patient but demanding, correcting her form, demonstrating techniques, occasionally disarming her with casual flicks of his wrist that made her realize just how outmatched she'd be in a real fight. Finally, he called a halt. "Enough for today. You're tired, and pushing further will only embed bad habits." Ophelia collapsed onto a bench, grateful for the reprieve. Emery's retrieved water from a side table, handing her a cup. She drank deeply, tasting minerals and cold. "Why now?" she asked. Why start training me when we have so little time before the observer arrives? Because you'll need to know how to defend yourself, Emrys said, sitting beside her. The distance between them was carefully maintained, close enough for conversation, far enough for propriety. If things go wrong, if the court decides Owain must die anyway, you'll be caught in the crossfire. I want you to have at least a chance of survival. You think they'll betray the agreement? I think the court is made up of creatures who've survived millennia through ruthless pragmatism. If Idris returns with terms we can't accept, or if the observer reports something that frightens them, they won't hesitate to strike. He turned to look at her, and his pale eyes held something she couldn't name. I won't lose you, Ophelia. Not after everything. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Emrys, she began, but he stood abruptly, moving to the weapons rack. There's something else you should learn, he said, his back to her. About the bond between you and Owain. About what it means, what it could become. Ophelia set down her cup, her stomach tightening. I thought we'd covered that in the crypt. I told you the mechanics, the risks. He selected a silver dagger from the rack, testing its weight. But I didn't tell you about the intimacy of it, the way bonded pairs can feel each other across distances, share thoughts, emotions, even pain. That doesn't sound so terrible. It isn't, until you lose your sense of where you end, and they begin. Emrys turned, and his expression was haunted. I had a blood servant once, centuries ago, a woman named Branwen. She was brave and brilliant, and the bond between us deepened until she could anticipate my needs before I voiced them, could fight beside me as if we shared one mind. What happened to her? I was ambushed by rivals, wounded badly enough that I nearly died. His fingers tightened on the dagger's hilt. And because our bond had grown so deep, so complete, she felt every moment of my agony. It destroyed something in her that sharing, of immortal pain with a mortal mind. She survived physically, but the woman I'd known was gone, hollowed out. Horror crawled up Ophelia's spine. Did she recover? Eventually, after I severed the bond. He set the dagger down with deliberate care. It nearly killed us both. Blood bonds, once they reach a certain depth, become part of your very essence. Breaking them is like tearing out pieces of your soul. You're warning me, Ophelia said slowly, telling me to be careful how close I let Owain get. I'm telling you to be aware of what you're risking. Emrys moved to stand before her, and for once, he let her see the full weight of his age, his grief, his terrible awareness of time's costs. Every day you spend bonded to Owain, the connection grows. Soon you'll feel his moods, his fears. Later, his thoughts will echo in your mind. Eventually, you may not be able to tell where Ophelia ends and where the bond begins. And you think I should break it now, before it gets that far? I think you should understand what you're choosing. He knelt before her, bringing his eyes level with hers. Because once the bond reaches a certain threshold, there's no going back. You'll be linked to Owain for as long as you both live. His joys will be yours, but so will his suffering. His enemies will become your enemies. His fate will shape yours. Ophelia met his ancient gaze and saw the truth there. He wasn't just warning her about Owain. He was warning her about himself, about the way their orbits had begun to overlap, the way she'd started thinking of Blackthorn as home, the way her heart had begun to betray her with impossible feelings for a creature who'd lived 8 centuries. What if I want that? She asked quietly. What if I want to be bound to this place, these people? What if I'm tired of being alone? Then you'll have what you want, Emrys said, his voice rough. But you'll pay for it with your humanity, your independence, your future. You'll become something other than what you were meant to be. Maybe I was never meant to be anything at all. Ophelia's hand rose, trembling, to touch his face. His skin was cold as marble, but she didn't pull away. Maybe I was just drifting until I found something worth holding on to. Ophelia. Her name was a warning and a plea. Tell me, she said, that you don't feel it too. This pull between us. Tell me I'm imagining it, and I'll stop. For a long moment, he was silent, still as only the undead could be. Then his hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. I can't, he whispered, because I feel it. Every moment you're near. Every time you show courage that shames my 8 centuries of existence. Every time you choose compassion over self-preservation. His eyes closed. You make me remember what it was like to be human, to want things beyond survival and power. Then why push me away? Because I'm immortal and you're not. Because I'm a monster and you deserve better. Because if I let myself love you." He stopped, the word hanging between them like a confession. "Love?" Ophelia breathed. "Yes." He opened his eyes, and she saw centuries of loneliness there, of watching everyone he'd cared for age and die while he remained unchanging. "And I cannot do that to you. Cannot watch you wither while I stay young. Cannot condemn you to loving something that feeds on blood and hides from the sun. That's not your choice to make." Ophelia leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Warm skin against cold. "I get to decide what I risk, what I give, who I love. Not you, not the court, me. You're 20 years old, 22, and I've seen enough of life to know what I want." Her other hand found his, threading their fingers together. "I want purpose. I want to matter. I want to protect Owain and help you build something good in this dark world. And yes, I want this whatever this is between us, even if it's impossible and doomed and foolish." Ophelia, her name, was a broken sound, full of longing and grief. "Tell me you don't want it," she challenged. "Tell me to leave, and I'll go. I'll break the bond with Owain, take the gold you offered, and disappear. But tell me honestly, is that what you want?" The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so softly she barely heard, "No." "Then stop trying to protect me from my own choices." She pulled back to look at him fully. "I'm not Branwen. I'm not fragile. I've survived poverty and cruelty, and a father who drank himself stupid every night. I can survive this too, the bond, the court, even loving you. Can you?" His hand rose to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Can you survive watching me feed? Knowing I've killed, will kill again? Can you accept that I'll never grow old with you? Never give you the simple human life you deserve?" "I don't want simple. I never did." Ophelia smiled, fierce and certain. "I want extraordinary. I want to matter. And I've found that here, with you, with Owain. So stop trying to send me away for my own good." For a long moment, Emery simply stared at her, his expression cycling through emotions too complex to name. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was cold and gentle and devastating. Ophelia felt it in every nerve, every cell, this impossible connection between warm and cold, mortal and immortal, human and monster. His hand cradled the back of her head, keeping her close, and she tasted winter and ancient stone and something darker, richer, that might have been blood. When they finally broke apart, Emrys's eyes had darkened to slate gray, and his voice was ragged. "This is madness." "Yes," Ophelia agreed, breathless. "But it's our madness. The court will use it against us if they discover. Then we don't let them discover." She stood, pulling him up with her. "We're careful, discreet, but we don't deny what's between us. Agreed?" He studied her for a long moment, then a real smile crossed his face. Not the careful, controlled expressions he usually wore, but something genuine and warm despite the coldness of his skin. "You're going to be the death of me. You're already dead." "Fair point." He kissed her again, briefer this time but no less intense. "Very well. But we set rules, boundaries, for both our sakes. Such as? No feeding from you beyond what Owain requires for healing. Blood bonds are complicated enough without adding that intimacy." Ophelia nodded, though part of her was curious what it would feel like to have Emery's drink from her if it would be different than Owain's desperate hunger. "And we tell no one," Emery's continued. "Not Owain, not Tegwen, certainly not the court's observer when they arrive. What's between us stays between us. Agreed. And if at any point you want to stop, to step back, you tell me. No guilt, no recrimination. Your freedom is sacrosanct. One condition," Ophelia said. "The same applies to you. If this becomes too much, if you need distance, you tell me. We're equals in this, Emrys. I won't be protected like a child or managed like a servant." He hesitated, then inclined his head. "Equals. You have my word." They sealed it with another kiss, this one deeper, more confident. Ophelia felt the bond between them, not the blood connection she shared with Owain, but something else, something chosen rather than forged in crisis. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. A polite cough from the doorway made them spring apart. Tegwen stood there, her granite face carefully neutral, though Ophelia thought she saw the ghost of a smile at the corners of the old woman's mouth. "Forgive the interruption, my lord," Tegwen said. But young Owain is asking for Ophelia. He's had another nightmare. The moment shattered, replaced by concern. Ophelia had learned that Owain suffered terrible dreams, memories of his mother's death, his father's sacrifice, the Ashbourne's attack. The bond let her feel the edges of his distress, a cold anxiety that prickled at the back of her mind. "I'll go to him," she said, then looked back at Emrys. "We'll continue this later? Count on it." His eyes held promise and heat that made her breath catch. She followed Tegwin from the training hall, her lips still tingling from Emrys's kisses, her heart lighter than it had been in days. Behind her, she felt rather than heard Emrys return to his practice, the whisper of wood through air, as he worked through forms to master the restlessness she'd awakened in him. "We're doomed," she thought, but couldn't bring herself to care. Absolutely, gloriously doomed. Chapter 9. Shadows of the Past. She found Owain in his room, huddled in the window seat, with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Pale afternoon light filtered through the glass, and he pressed as close to it as he dared, his skin reddening slightly from the exposure. "Owain," Ophelia said gently, moving to sit beside him. "Tegwin said you had a nightmare." "It wasn't a nightmare." His voice was small, distant. It was a memory. "Of the night my father died." Ophelia's heart ached. She pulled him close, and he came willingly, burrowing against her side. Through the bond, she felt echoes of his fear, the scent of smoke and blood, the sound of screams, the terrible knowledge that his very existence had cost everything. "Tell me about him," she said softly. "Your father. What was he like?" Owain was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "He was kind, patient. He used to read to me every night Welsh poetry, old legends. He said I needed to know where I came from, even if I didn't quite fit anywhere." "You fit here." "Do I?" Owain's dark eyes turned to her. "I'm not vampire enough for the court, not human enough for the mortal world. I'm just between. Always between." "Between isn't bad," Ophelia said. "Between means you understand both sides. It means you can be a bridge instead of a barrier." "My father said something like that once." A ghost of a smile touched Owain's lips. "He said I was a gift, not a curse. That I could help vampires remember their humanity and help humans understand that vampires aren't all monsters." His expression darkened. "But then the court came, and he died protecting me, and I wonder if he was wrong, if I'm just a curse after all." "He wasn't wrong." Ophelia took Owain's face in her hands, making him look at her. "You're one of the best people I've ever met, vampire or mortal. You're compassionate and brave, and you care about others even when they want to hurt you. That's not a curse. That's extraordinary." "You really believe that?" "With everything in me." Owain's arms wrapped around her, and they sat like that for a long time, mortal girl and vampire child, bonded by blood and choice, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Through their connection, Ophelia felt his fear slowly ease, replaced by something tentatively hopeful. "Ophelia," Owain said eventually, "what happened between you and Emrys?" She went very still. "What do you mean?" "I felt something. Through the bond. Not your emotions exactly, but warmth. Happiness. Something I haven't felt from you before." He pulled back to study her face. "Did he hurt you?" No, nothing like that." Ophelia felt heat creep up her neck. "We just talked about things. About the bond? Among other things." Owain's eyes narrowed with a perception beyond his years. "You like him?" It's not," Ophelia floundered, caught between honesty and the promise she'd made to keep their relationship secret. "It's okay," Owain said softly. "I like him too. He's been more of a father to me than my real father ever had the chance to be." A pause. "I think he likes you. I've seen the way he watches you when he thinks no one's looking." "Owain." "I won't tell anyone," the boy promised. "But I'm glad. Emrys has been alone for so long. Too long. Maybe you can make of him remember what happiness feels like." Ophelia pulled him close again, blinking back unexpected tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I've been alive a long time," Owain said, his voice solemn. 6 whole years, despite everything." Ophelia laughed. "Ancient, then." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, Ophelia reading to him from a book of Welsh legends while the light slowly faded. She was partway through a tale about Blodeuwedd, the woman made of flowers who betrayed her husband and was transformed into an owl when Owain interrupted. Do you think that's what I am? He asked. Something unnatural that will betray everyone who trusts me? Blodeuwedd was created by magic and given no choice in her nature, Ophelia said. You're different. You have agency, the ability to choose who and what you become. She closed the book. The court fears you because they don't understand that difference. They think all vampire children are the same, doomed to become threats. But you get to prove them wrong. And if I can't, if I'm not strong enough, then you have Emrys, and me, and everyone in Blackthorn who believes in you. Ophelia's hand found his. You're not facing this alone, Owain. Never alone. The bond between them pulsed with warmth, and she felt his gratitude like sunshine breaking through clouds. Whatever else happened, whatever the court decided, she had given this child hope. That mattered more than she could articulate. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Emrys entered, freshly dressed in dark velvet, his hair damp as if he'd bathed. The evening had brought strength back to his features, erasing the daylight's toll. Forgive the intrusion, he said, but Tegwin has prepared dinner. Owain, you'll need to feed as well. I'm not hungry, Owain said. But Ophelia felt the lie through their bond, felt the gnawing emptiness that came from too long between feedings. Don't lie to her, Emrys said gently. She can feel it through the bond, can't she? Owain's face colored. Maybe. Then come, both of you. Emrys's gaze met Ophelia's, and she saw warmth there, carefully banked but present. We should eat together, like a family. The word hung in the air, strange and hopeful. Ophelia found herself smiling. Yes, let's. They made their way to the dining hall, a smaller, more intimate space than the grand rooms Ophelia had seen during the battle. A table was laid with simple but good food, roasted chicken, bread, cheese, wine, and for Owain, a crystal glass filled with dark liquid that Ophelia tried not to think about too closely. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily despite the strangeness of their circumstances. Emrys told stories of his mortal life, fragments from 8 centuries past, rendered vivid by his perfect memory. Owain laughed at a tale of young Emrys trying to impress a girl and falling into a pig trough. Ophelia shared memories of the stables, of the horses she'd loved, of the one time she'd sneaked into the village festival and danced until dawn. It was normal and peaceful and achingly domestic. For a few hours, they weren't an ancient vampire, a hunted child, and a mortal girl tangled in impossible bonds. They were just people, sharing a meal, sharing their lives, finding comfort in each other's presence. When Owain's eyes began to droop, Emrys carried him up to bed, the boy's protests drowsy and half-hearted. Ophelia followed, watching as Emrys tucked him in with a gentleness that made her chest ache. Sleep well, Emrys murmured, brushing hair from Owain's forehead. Tomorrow we'll practice your Latin. You're falling behind. Because Latin is boring, Owain mumbled, already half asleep. Because Latin is essential for understanding the court's documents and treaties. Sleep now. We'll argue about it tomorrow. But Owain was already gone, his breathing evening out into the shallow rhythm of vampire sleep. Emrys stood, and when he turned to find Ophelia, watching from the doorway, something vulnerable crossed his features. He's so young, Emrys said quietly. Sometimes I forget how young. He acts so adult, so serious, but he's still just a child who lost everything. He has you, Ophelia said. That's not nothing. I hope it's enough. Emrys moved to the door, pausing beside her. Walk with me? I find myself restless tonight. Lead on. They walked through Blackthorn's corridors, past tapestries and portraits that watched with painted eyes. Emrys led her to the North Tower, the highest point in the manor, accessible only by a narrow spiral stair. At the top, they emerged onto a small platform open to the night sky. The view was breathtaking. The moor stretched away in all directions, silver under the waning moon. In the distance, Ophelia could see the faint lights of the village. And beyond that, mountains silhouetted against stars. I come here when I need to think, Emrys said, leaning against the stone parapet. To remind myself how large the world is, how small our conflicts in the grand scheme of things. Does it help? Sometimes. He turned to look at her, moonlight making his pale skin almost luminous. Other times it just makes me feel ancient, tired. Ophelia moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. You don't seem tired to me. You seem purposeful, determined. Because of Owain, and now because of you. His hand found hers in the darkness. "You've given me something I haven't had in centuries, Ophelia. Something I thought I'd lost forever." "What?" "Hope." The word was soft, almost wondering. The belief that things can change, that monsters can choose to be better. That love. He stopped, then continued. That love might be possible, even for creatures like me. "It is possible," Ophelia said. "It's happening, right now, between us." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, letting him wrap her in arms that were cold but gentle. They stood like that for a long time, two figures outlined against the night sky, finding warmth in each other despite the chill wind that swept across the moor. "The observer will come soon," Emery said eventually. "When they do, everything will change. We'll be watched, judged, constrained in ways we aren't now. Then we make the most of the time we have," Ophelia replied. "Starting now." She tilted her face up, and he kissed her longer this time, deeper, as if trying to memorize the taste and texture of her warmth. Ophelia felt the restraint in him, the careful control that kept him from losing himself in the moment. But she also felt his desire, his longing, the way his hands trembled slightly as they framed her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, though Emrys didn't need to, he rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever comes," he said, "whatever the court demands, whatever trials we face, I want you to know something." "What?" "That I choose this, choose you, not out of obligation or strategy, but because being with you makes 8 centuries of loneliness worth surviving." His voice was raw, stripped of the careful control he usually maintained. "You matter to me, Ophelia Furch Owen, more than is wise, more than is safe, but undeniably and completely." Ophelia's heart felt too large for her chest. "And you matter to me. Monster, vampire, ancient lord. None of that changes how I feel." "Which is," she smiled against his lips, "that I'm falling in love with you, Emrys Caro, and I'm not sorry for it." His answering smile was like sunrise, beautiful and impossible and full of light that shouldn't exist in darkness. "Then we're both doomed." "Gloriously," Ophelia agreed. They stayed on the tower until nearly dawn, talking and kissing and planning for the uncertain future ahead. And when the first hint of gray touched the eastern sky, Emrys walked her back to her room, kissing her once more at her door before retreating to wherever he spent the daylight hours. Ophelia fell into bed, exhausted and exhilarated, her lips still tingling, her heart full of dangerous hope. 14 days until the observer arrived. 14 days to prepare, to train, to steal moments of happiness before the court's scrutiny fell upon them. She'd make every moment count. Chapter 10. The Arrival. The 14th day dawned cold and clear. Ophelia stood in the courtyard, watching the horizon with a tension that had built over the past 2 weeks. The time had passed both too quickly and too slowly, filled with training and stolen moments with Emrys, with reading to Owain, and learning to navigate her growing bond with the boy. She was stronger now, faster, more capable. The bond had continued to deepen despite Emrys's warnings, until she could sense Owain's presence like a distant warmth at the edge of her awareness. And her feelings for Emrys had grown from tentative attraction into something that terrified her with its intensity. "Love," she thought, the word still strange in her mind. "I love a vampire lord who's lived 8 centuries. They're coming," Emrys said from beside her. He'd emerged from the manor dressed formally in black and silver, every inch the ancient lord, but his hand found hers, squeezing gently, a private gesture of support. Ophelia followed his gaze and saw them, a small party riding across the moor. 3 figures on horseback, moving with the fluid grace that marked them as vampire. "3?" she asked. "I thought there would only be one observer." "So did I." Emrys's jaw tightened. "The court has sent more than we anticipated." As the riders drew closer, Ophelia could make out details. The lead figure was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in traveling clothes of deep green. Behind him rode 2 others, a woman with hair like fire, and a smaller figure whose features Ophelia couldn't quite distinguish. They reached the gates, and Emrys moved forward to greet them, Ophelia at his side. Owain had wanted to be present, but Emrys had insisted he remain inside until they understood the situation. "Lord Emrys," the lead rider said, dismounting with easy grace. Up close, he was striking strong features, hair dark as earth, eyes the color of moss after rain, and young, impossibly young, appearing no more than 25, though his bearing spoke of much greater age. "I am Branap Idris, sent by the Court of Ash to serve as observer for the vampire child Owain ap Murig. Lord Bran. Emrys inclined his head, formal and cool. The court mentioned a single observer. You've brought companions. Safeguards. Bran gestured to the woman, who'd also dismounted. This is Hoelwyn of the Southern Houses, a blood scholar versed in the study of Dhampir and vampire children, and my sister Ceri. The smaller figure dismounted last, pulling back her hood to reveal a face that made Ophelia's breath catch. She was beautiful in the way of very old vampires' ageless features, silver blonde hair, eyes like winter ice. But she looked perhaps 15, frozen in that awkward space between child and adult. A child observer? Emrys said, his voice tight with suspicion. A vampire child, Ceri corrected, her voice light but carrying authority beyond her apparent years. I am 143 years old, Lord Emrys. I survived my childhood and maturity. The court thought my perspective might prove valuable in assessing young Owain. Understanding dawned on Ophelia like cold water. The court hadn't just sent an observer, they'd sent a vampire child who'd navigated the same dangerous path Owain was walking. Someone who could evaluate whether he posed the same threats, or whether he might prove different. It was clever, and terrifying. Welcome to Blackthorn Manor, Emrys said, though his tone suggested anything but welcome. Your rooms are prepared. Tegwin will show you to them. Unnecessary, Bran said. We'd like to meet the child first, to begin our assessment immediately. He's 6 years old and frightened, Ophelia heard herself say. Perhaps you could give him time to adjust to your presence before you start evaluating him like an experiment. 3 pairs of vampire eyes turned to her, and she felt the weight of their ancient scrutiny. And you are? Hoelwyn asked, her voice accented with something northern Scottish, perhaps, or older. Ophelia Furch Owen. I'm Owain's. She hesitated, unsure how to define her role. Bonded protector. Emrys supplied smoothly. She's blood-bound to Owain and serves as his guardian during daylight hours. A blood bond with a mortal? Bran's eyebrows rose. That's highly irregular. These are irregular circumstances, Emrys replied. But I assure you, the bond serves its purpose. Owain is well cared for. We'll be the judges of that, Ceri said, moving forward. Despite her small stature, she projected a confidence that made Ophelia uneasy. Where is he? Inside. And he'll remain there until I'm satisfied you mean him. No harm. We're here as observers, not executioners, Bran said. The court sent us to assess, not to attack. Forgive me if I don't take that on faith, Emrys replied. Your predecessor tried to kill him. Lady Aelwyn exceeded her authority, Bran acknowledged, which is why she's been recalled and we've been sent in her place. The court desires accurate information, not violence. A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Emrys nodded curtly. Very well. But Ophelia and I will be present during your meeting. And if you threaten Owain in any way, you'll discover exactly how protective I can be. Understood, Bran said, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't particularly worried. They moved inside. The 3 court representatives following Emrys through corridors that suddenly felt smaller, more oppressive with these strangers present. Ophelia walked beside Ceri, studying the vampire child from the corner of her eye. You're staring, Ceri said without looking at her. Sorry, I didn't know there were other vampire children. There aren't. Not many. Ceri's voice was matter of fact. Most die in infancy. Those who survive face the court's scrutiny. Some pass inspection. Others. She trailed off meaningfully. Others are killed. Others are deemed too dangerous to live, yes. Ceri glanced at her, and Ophelia saw something surprisingly human in those cold eyes. Sympathy, perhaps, or understanding. I was lucky. My transformation was controlled. My maker prepared. Owain. His birth was tragedy. That makes the court nervous. He's not dangerous, Ophelia insisted. Not yet. But what about in 10 years? 20? When he's physically mature but still emotionally developing? Ceri shook her head. I'm not saying the court is right to fear him, but I understand their concern. They reached Owain's room, and Emrys knocked gently before entering. The boy sat in his window seat, a book forgotten in his lap, his face pale with apprehension. When he saw the strangers, he shrank back instinctively. It's all right, Ophelia said, moving to his side immediately. Through the bond, she felt his terror bone deep and primal. They're here to meet you, nothing more. Owain's dark eyes found Sari, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or kinship. "You're like me." "In some ways," Sari said, moving forward with careful, non-threatening steps. "Though I suspect we're different in others." She stopped a few feet away, giving him space. "I'm Sari. I was turned when I was 14, a century and a half ago. I understand what it's like to be young and vampire and frightened of what that means." "The court sent you to decide if I should die," Owain said, his voice surprisingly steady. "The court sent me to understand you," Sari corrected. "To determine if you're a threat, or simply a child caught in circumstances beyond your control. And if you decide I'm a threat, then I'll recommend additional safeguards and oversight. Not death, I'm not an executioner, whatever you might fear." Owain studied her for a long moment, then looked at Emrys. "Do I have to talk to them?" "Yes," Emrys said gently. "But I'll be here. Ophelia will be here. Nothing will happen to you. Promise?" "I swear it on Murig's memory. On your father's grave. On everything I hold sacred." The words seemed to give Owain courage. He nodded slowly, setting aside his book. "All right. What do you want to know?" What followed was hours of careful questioning. Bran asked about Owen's daily routine, his education, his feeding habits. Holwyn observed silently, taking notes in a leather journal. And Sari talked with him, really talked, not interrogated, about what it felt like to be young and vampire, to be caught between human and immortal worlds. Through it all, Ophelia stayed close, one hand on Owain's shoulder, lending him strength through their bond. And Emrys stood guard like a sentinel, ready to intervene at the first sign of threat. By late afternoon, when Owain was exhausted and pale, Emrys called a halt. "Enough for today. The boy needs rest." "Of course," Bran said, closing his own journal. "We've learned a great deal. Thank you, Owain, for your cooperation." Owain merely nodded, too tired to speak. Ophelia helped him to bed, staying with him until he fell into restless sleep. When she finally emerged, she found Emrys waiting in the corridor, his expression troubled. "How did it go?" "How did it go?" she asked. "Too well. They were too reasonable, too understanding." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "I don't trust it. Maybe they're genuinely here to observe. Or maybe they're lulling us into complacency before they strike." Emrys pulled her into a shadowed alcove. "Away from any potential eavesdroppers. I want you to be careful around them, especially Sari. She's clever, and she has the court's ear. She seemed kind to Owain, which makes her more dangerous, not less. If she befriends him, gains his trust, she'll learn things we don't want the court to know." His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "Promise me you'll be vigilant." "I promise." Ophelia covered his hands with hers. "We'll get through this. We've survived worse." "Have we?" But he kissed her anyway, brief and fierce, before stepping back. "I need to speak with our guests. Establish ground rules for their stay. Will you watch Owain?" "Of course." She returned to Owain's room, settling into the chair beside his bed with a book she didn't really read. Instead, she watched him sleep and thought about vampire children who survived and those who didn't. About ancient lords trying to protect their wards. About mortal girls who'd tangled themselves in immortal conflicts. "We're at a crossroads," she realized. "Whatever the court decides will determine all our fates." She just hoped they'd choose mercy. As night fell over Blackthorn Manor, Ophelia felt the weight of the future pressing, down like a physical thing, heavy and inevitable and impossible to escape. The game had begun in earnest. Now they just had to survive it. Chapter 11. Revelations and Choices. The observers stayed for 7 days, and each day felt like walking a knife's edge. Ophelia watched them carefully, Bran with his formal courtesy, Hulwen with her silent observation, and Sari with her unsettling combination of childlike appearance and ancient wisdom. They moved through Blackthorn like ghosts, present but not intrusive, watching everything while appearing to watch nothing. On the 3rd day, Ophelia found Sari in the library, reading a book on Welsh history. "May I join you?" Ophelia asked. Sari looked up, surprise flashing across her ageless features. "Please." Ophelia settled into a chair opposite her, studying the vampire child. Up close, she could see the tiny imperfections that marked her as something other than human. The too perfect symmetry of her features, the way her eyes caught and held light, the absolute stillness of her posture. "You want to ask me something?" Sari observed. "I can see it in your face. How do you do it?" Ophelia asked. How do you stay yourself? After so long? After everything you've experienced? Sari was quiet for a moment, her finger marking her place in the book. That's a more complex question than you know. The truth is, I'm not the same person I was when I was turned. That girl, the one who was 14 and frightened and dying of fever, she's long gone. I'm what grew from her, shaped by decades of experience and the demands of immortality. But you remember being her? Oh yes, I remember everything. That's the curse and gift of vampirism, perfect memory. Every joy, every sorrow, every regret stays sharp and clear forever. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Sometimes I envy mortals their ability to forget, to let pain soften with time. Is that what you're evaluating in Owain? Whether his memories will shape him into something dangerous? Partly. Sari set aside her book. But also whether he has the temperament to survive a century, 2 centuries, of being young. Most vampire children go mad eventually. The disconnect between appearing 6 and having 6 decades of experience becomes too great. They lose their sense of self, become trapped between child and ancient. Ophelia's stomach tightened. Will that happen to Owain? I don't know yet. He's resilient, certainly. And he has you, the bond you share seems to ground him, give him stability. Sari's ice blue eyes studied her. But bonds can be dangerous too. What happens when you age and he doesn't? When you're 40 and he still appears 6? The psychological strain could break you both. We'll adapt? Will you? Sari leaned forward. I'm not trying to be cruel, Ophelia, but you need to understand what you've committed to. That bond will only deepen with time. Eventually, you'll feel everything he feels, his hunger, his rage, his despair. Can you carry that weight for decades? For a lifetime? If it means he survives, yes. And what about your own life? Your own desires? Sari's voice was gentle but relentless. You're 22. Don't you want to marry? Have children? Grow old with someone you love? The question hit too close to home. Ophelia thought of Emrys, of the impossible feelings between them, of the future they could never have. At least not the simple, human future Sari described. I've made my choice, she said firmly. Owain needs me. That matters more than hypothetical futures. Even if that choice costs you everything? Even then. Sari studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I believe you, which is both reassuring and concerning. The court will want to know about you, about the bond, about your commitment. They'll see you as either a valuable safeguard or a dangerous variable. Which do you see me as? Both, Sari said honestly. You stabilize Owain, yes, but you also represent something unprecedented. A mortal who can channel vampire power. That makes the court nervous. Before Ophelia could respond, the library door opened, and Bran entered, his expression grave. Forgive the interruption, but Lord Emrys requests everyone's presence in the grand hall. Immediately. Something in his tone sent ice down Ophelia's spine. What's happened? The court has sent new orders. Bran's moss-green eyes held sympathy. And they're not what we hoped. They assembled in the grand hall, Emrys standing tall and cold at the head of the room, Owain clutching Ophelia's hand, the 3 observers arranged opposite, and Tegwin with the remaining servants lining the walls. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Bran held a scroll bound with black wax, the seal of the Court of Ash imprinted on it. He broke it carefully and read, By order of the Court of Ash, High Council of Vampire Kind, the vampire child known as Owain ap Murrig, born of forbidden union between a vampire and mortal, has been assessed and judged. While the observers find no immediate threat in the child's current state, the court cannot permit the risk of allowing a vampire child to mature without absolute safeguards. Ophelia's hand tightened around Owain's. Therefore, Bran continued, his voice heavy, the court decrees the following. Owain ap Murrig will be remanded to the court's custody, to be raised under direct supervision at the Citadel of Ash. There he will receive proper education and constant oversight. Lord Emrys Caro will retain visiting rights but will forfeit guardianship. No, Emrys said, the single word sharp as a blade. These are the court's terms. I said no. Emrys moved forward, and even weakened by daylight filtering through high windows, his presence was formidable. Owain stays with me. That was our agreement. The agreement was for observation, Bran said carefully. The court has observed. Now they've made their decision. Then they've made the wrong one. Emrys's hands clenched into fists. I swore to Murrig that I would protect his son, raise him, keep him safe. I will not break that oath. Then you defy the court. Hulwyn spoke for the first time, her Scottish accent thick, and defiance carries consequences. What consequences? Ophelia demanded. You'll attack us? Kill a child for refusing to be imprisoned? Not imprisoned, Sari said quietly. Protected, educated. The Citadel isn't a prison, it's the safest place for a vampire child to mature. It's a cage, Owain said, his voice small but steady. And I don't want to go. What you want isn't the issue, Bran said, though he looked pained. The court has decided. The court can reconsider, Emrys interrupted. Send word that I request an appeal. I'll come to the Citadel myself, make my case before the full council. That will take weeks, Hulwyn said, and the answer will be the same. Then I'll have weeks to prepare my arguments. Emrys's pale eyes were hard as stone. I will not simply hand Owain over like chattel. Bran looked between Emrys and Owain, then at Ophelia, and something troubled moved in his expression. Finally, he nodded. Very well. I'll send word of your appeal request, but understand the court rarely changes its mind. And if they deny your appeal, then I'll face that when it comes. Emrys moved to stand beside Owain, his hand heavy on the boy's shoulder. Until then, he remains under my protection. The observers withdrew, and silence fell over the hall. Owain was shaking, his small body trembling with fear and anger. Ophelia pulled him close, feeling his emotions crash through their bond like waves against rocks. They can't take me away, Owain whispered. They can't. I won't go. We'll find a way, Emrys said, though Ophelia heard the doubt beneath his certainty. I promised your father. I keep my promises. But what if we can't stop them? Owain pulled away, his dark eyes desperate. What if I have to go to the Citadel? Then I'll go with you, Ophelia heard herself say. Both vampires turned to stare at her. The bond requires a daylight guardian, she continued, the plan forming even as she spoke. If Owain goes to the Citadel, I go too. The court can't separate us without risking the bond's stability. Ophelia, no, Emrys said immediately. The Citadel is dangerous. You'd be surrounded by ancient vampires, any one of whom could kill you without effort. But they won't, because I'm valuable. I'm the thing that keeps Owain stable. She looked between them. It's leverage, a reason for the court to negotiate rather than simply take what they want. It's also insanely dangerous, Emrys said, but she saw calculation in his eyes. Though, it might work. If we position it correctly, make it clear that Owain's stability depends on you, then they have to accept both of us or risk destabilizing the very child they're trying to control. I don't want you in danger, Owain said. I don't want any of this. Neither do I, Ophelia admitted. But we play the hand we're dealt. Emrys was quiet for a long moment, his ancient mind working through possibilities and risks. Finally, he nodded. It's the best option we have. I'll include it in my appeal. Make it clear that Owain comes as a package deal with his bonded guardian. And what about you? Ophelia asked. What will you do? Fight. Plan. Prepare for every possible outcome. His hand found hers, cold fingers threading through warm. And if worst comes to worst, if the court refuses the appeal and tries to take Owain by force, then we run. All of us. Leave Wales, leave Britain, disappear somewhere the court can't find us. They'll hunt us forever, Ophelia said. Then we'll stay hidden forever. He met her eyes, and she saw the absolute commitment there. I will not lose Owain. Or you. Whatever it takes. The words hung between them, a vow and a promise. Ophelia felt the weight of it settle over her, the understanding that she'd bound herself not just to Owain, but to this fight, this cause, this impossible dream of keeping a vampire child safe in a world that wanted him dead. Together, she said. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, Emrys agreed, and Owain, tears streaming down his pale cheeks, whispered, together. They stood like that in the grand hall, three figures united against the weight of centuries and the judgment of immortals, and Ophelia felt something shift inside her, a final transformation from the person she'd been into the person this crisis had made her. She was no longer a stable girl who'd stumbled into something beyond her understanding. She was a warrior, a guardian, a woman who'd chosen her family and would fight for them with everything she possessed. The Court of Ash could bring its judgment. She'd be ready. Chapter 12. The blood bond fulfilled. 3 days after the court's decree, Ophelia woke to find Emrys standing at her window, silhouetted against the pre-dawn gray. "You should be resting," she said, pushing herself up. "The sun will rise soon." "I couldn't sleep." He didn't turn, his voice distant. The appeal was denied. Ophelia's stomach dropped. "When?" "Bran delivered the message an hour ago. The court sees no reason to reconsider. They'll send an escort in 3 days to retrieve Owain." Now he turned, and his face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "They're taking him, and there's nothing I can do." "Then we run. I've been mapping routes all night, north through the mountains to Scotland, or west to Ireland, or east into England, all equally dangerous. The court has agents everywhere. We'd be fugitives forever. Better fugitives than separated." Emery's moved to sit beside her on the bed, his cold hand finding hers in the dim light. Is running with a hunted child and an ancient vampire really the life you want?" "It's the life I choose." Ophelia squeezed his hand. "I meant what I said. We're in this together. You could still leave. Take the gold I offered. Start fresh somewhere far from here." "Stop." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not leaving. Not Owain, and not you. So you can stop trying to give me an out. I just want you to understand what you're sacrificing." "I understand perfectly." She cupped his face, making him meet her eyes. "I love you, Emrys. I love Owain. This is where I belong. Running, fighting, hiding, none of that changes how I feel." His eyes closed, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me. But don't push me away." He kissed her, then desperate and fierce, as if trying to pour 8 centuries of loneliness into the connection. Ophelia kissed him back with equal intensity, tasting winter and stone and the faint metallic tang that was uniquely vampire. When they broke apart, both breathless, though only Ophelia actually needed breath, Emrys rested his forehead against hers. "If we run," he said, "we leave everything. Blackthorn, Wales, any chance of peace. We become nomads, always moving, never safe. Or we fight. Against the entire court? That's suicide. Not if we're smart about it." Ophelia's mind raced, pieces clicking together. The court wants Owain for control, for oversight. What if we give them something better? What could be better than direct custody? A demonstration. Proof that Owain can be trusted, that he's not a threat. She pulled back, excitement building. "The bond between us, it's unprecedented, right? The court doesn't understand it, doesn't know its limits. What if we show them what it can do? Show them that Owain is stable, controlled, capable of growth without becoming dangerous? How would we demonstrate that?" "I don't know yet, but we have 3 days to figure it out." She stood, pacing. 3 days to prove to the court that taking Owain would be a mistake, that leaving him here, under your guardianship, is the safer option. Emrys watched her pace, something like hope dawning in his expression. "You're talking about creating a spectacle, a display of power and control that makes them reconsider." "Exactly. It's risky. If we miscalculate, if Owain loses control during the demonstration, he won't, because I'll be there, anchoring him through the bond." Ophelia stopped pacing, certainty settling over her. "This is what the bond was for, Emrys. Not just to help him heal, but to prove he can exist safely. Let me prove it." For a long moment, he studied her, his ancient gaze searching her face. Then slowly, he nodded. "Tell me what you need." They spent the morning planning, drawing in Owain when he woke. The boy was frightened but determined, willing to try anything that might let him stay at Blackthorn. By noon, they had the outline of a plan dangerous and unprecedented, but possible. "We'll need witnesses," Emery said. "The court's observers, obviously, but also neutral. Parties vampires from other houses who can testify to what they see. Can you gather them in 3 days?" "I can try." He began writing messages, calling on old alliances and ancient debts. By evening, ravens were flying to estates across Wales and beyond, carrying invitations to a demonstration that might change everything. The observers were wary when Emrys explained the plan. "You want to showcase the bond's power?" Bran said, his expression skeptical. "In front of witnesses?" "I want to prove that Owain is stable and controlled," Emrys replied. "That the bond with Ophelia provides safeguards the court's custody never could." "And if something goes wrong?" Holwyn asked. "If the boy loses control, or the bond fails, then you'll have evidence to support the court's decision." Emrys's voice was steady, but Ophelia saw the fear in his eyes. "But I don't believe it will fail. I believe Owain and Ophelia will show you something you've never seen before." Sari, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "What exactly are you planning to demonstrate?" "The full extent of the bond," Ophelia said. "The way it allows me to channel Owain's power, to anchor his control. We're going to show you that a bonded vampire child is safer than an unbonded one." "That's never been proven, because it's never been done properly," Emrys interrupted. "The bonds in the histories were rushed, desperate, formed in crisis. This one was chosen, nurtured, allowed to grow naturally. It's different, or more dangerous," Hulwyn muttered. "I guess we'll find out," Ophelia said with more confidence than she felt. The night of the demonstration arrived too quickly. The grand hall had been transformed into a makeshift arena, with space cleared in the center and chairs arranged around the perimeter. Witnesses began arriving as sunset deepened vampire lords from across Wales, each accompanied by their retinue. Ophelia recognized some of them from the siege. Lady Aylwyn, her face still scarred, watching with undisguised hatred. Lord Idris, the High Executioner, his storm-cloud eyes giving nothing away. "So many," Owain whispered, pressed against Ophelia's side. "What if I fail?" "You won't." Ophelia knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. "I'm with you. Through the bond, we're connected. Whatever happens, we face it together. Promise?" "I swear it." She pressed her forehead to his. "Trust me?" "Always." Emrys appeared at her elbow, dressed formally in black velvet embroidered with silver. He'd tied his dark hair back, revealing the sharp angles of his face, and he looked every inch the ancient lord, powerful and remote, and utterly in control. "It's time," he said quietly. "Are you ready?" Ophelia stood, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be." They moved to the center of the hall, the three of them, and silence fell. Dozens of vampire eyes watched, ancient and cold and judging. Bran stood to address the assembly. "By request of Lord Emrys Caro, we are gathered to witness a demonstration of the blood bond between the vampire child Owain ap Merrig and his mortal guardian, Ophelia Furch Owen. This demonstration is offered in appeal of the court's decree that Owain be remanded to Citadel custody." He sat, and Emrys stepped forward. "Honored guests," Emrys began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "You know the court's concerns about vampire children. They grow and change in ways we don't fully understand. They blur the line between mortal and immortal. They represent unpredictability in a world that values stability." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled vampires. "But what if there were a way to ensure that stability?" Emrys continued. "What if a properly forged blood bond could provide the safeguards the court seeks and more?" "Blood bonds fail," Idris called out. "History is full of servants who went mad from the strain, or who were killed when their bonded vampire died. They're unreliable. Traditional bonds, yes," Emrys agreed. "But what you're about to witness is something new. Something that could change our understanding of what's possible between vampire and mortal." He gestured to Ophelia and Owain. They moved to the center of the cleared space, standing face to face. Ophelia could feel Owain's fear through the bond, could feel his desperation to prove himself worthy. "I'm here," she sent through the connection. "We do this together." She felt his gratitude, his trust, and drew strength from it. "Owain," Emrys said, "show them your control. Show them what you can do when properly anchored." The boy nodded, closing his eyes, and Ophelia felt him reaching for his power, the vampire strength that lived in his young body. But instead of letting it run wild, he channeled it through their bond, letting her help him shape and direct it. The air in the hall grew cold. Candle flames guttered and steadied, and around Owain, the shadows themselves seemed to respond, gathering and swirling in patterns that were beautiful rather than chaotic. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Even the ancient vampires looked surprised. "Shadow manipulation," Hulwyn breathed. "That's a skill that takes decades to master." "He's 6," someone else said. "How is this possible?" "Because he's not doing it alone," Emrys said, pride clear in his voice. "Ophelia anchors him, guides him. Through their bond, she provides the stability and control he needs to use his power safely." Ophelia felt the strain of it, felt the power flowing through her, cold and ancient and vast. But she held firm, her mortal will providing the structure Owain's young mind couldn't yet create alone. "More," she whispered. Show them what we can do together. Owain's eyes opened, not dark anymore but glowing with an inner light that was neither vampire red nor human warmth but something in between. And the shadows responded, coalescing into forms. Wolves made of darkness, birds of shadow, shapes that danced and spun through the hall. The assembly watched in stunned silence. Even Aelwyn's hatred had transformed into something like awe. Now, Emery said quietly to Ophelia, show them the bond's true strength. This was the dangerous part, the moment when everything could go wrong. Ophelia reached through the bond, not just accepting Owain's power but sharing her own essence, her warmth, her humanity, her mortal vitality. She felt it flow into him, felt the way it mixed with his vampire nature, creating something that was neither fully one nor the other but a harmonious blend. And the shadows exploded into light. Not burning sunlight but something softer, moonlight mixed with starlight, cool and beautiful and impossible. It filled the hall, banishing darkness without causing pain, and Ophelia heard vampires gasp in wonder, because this was what they'd lost when they became immortal. The ability to create light, to embody warmth, to balance darkness with brightness. An immortal girl and a vampire child were doing it together. The demonstration lasted perhaps 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. When they finally released the power, letting it fade back into normalcy, Ophelia's legs buckled. Emery's caught her instantly, lowering her gently to the floor while Owain collapsed against her, both of them exhausted but triumphant. Silence. Then, slowly, one vampire began to clap, then another, then the entire assembly, even those who'd come to condemn, rose to their feet in acknowledgement of what they'd just witnessed. Lord Idris moved forward, his expression unreadable. That was unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. Because it's never been done before, Emery said. This is what's possible when we stop fearing vampire children and start nurturing them, when we give them the tools and support they need to thrive, rather than simply survive. Idris looked between Emery's, Owain, and Ophelia. Then at Bran, who nodded slowly. The court will need to reconsider, Idris said finally. This changes our assessment. If the bond can provide this level of control, this degree of safety, then Owain should remain at Blackthorn. Emery's finished. Under my guardianship, with Ophelia as his bonded protector. Not as a risk to be contained, but as a child to be raised. Another long silence. Then Idris inclined his head, a small gesture, but one that carried weight. I will recommend to the court that their decree be overturned, he said, on the condition that the bond is monitored, that regular reports are provided, and that any sign of instability results in immediate reassessment. Agreed, Emery said immediately. Then I believe we have a new arrangement. Idris looked at Owain, and something almost like a smile touched his stern features. Well done, child. You've given the court much to think about. The assembly began to disperse, vampires filing out with low conversations buzzing. The observers gathered there, things, preparing to depart. Only Sari paused on her way out, looking back at Ophelia. You changed everything tonight, the vampire child said quietly. Not just for Owain, but for all vampire children. You showed that we can be more than threats to be eliminated. That was the point, Ophelia said. I know, and I'm grateful. Sari smiled, genuine warmth that made her look almost human. Take care of him. And yourself. What you did tonight. It will have consequences. Not all of them good. I know, Ophelia said. But it was worth it. Yes, Sari agreed. It was. Then she was gone. And it was just the three of them, Emery's, Ophelia, and Owain, standing in the empty hall amid the remnants of their triumph. We did it, Owain whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Emery's corrected, pulling them both into an embrace. You were brilliant. Brave and brilliant and everything I knew you could be. We all did it, Ophelia said, feeling tears prick her eyes. Together, just like we promised. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, drawing strength from their impossible family. Outside, the moon rose over Blackthorn Manor, painting everything in silver light. They'd won. Against all odds, against centuries of prejudice and fear, they'd proven that vampire children could be trusted, that bonds between mortal and immortal could be beautiful rather than destructive. But Sari's words echoed in Ophelia's mind. It will have consequences, not all of them good. She pushed the worry aside. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, they were together, safe, and free. That was enough. Epilogue. 1 year later. The garden had been Ophelia's idea. She stood now in its center, watching Owain practice his Latin with emeries under the shade of an ancient oak. The boy had grown, not physically, but in confidence, in skill, in the quiet certainty that he belonged. The bond between them had deepened over the months, until Ophelia could feel Owain's presence even when they were separated, could sense his moods and needs without words. It should have been invasive, but instead it felt natural, like breathing. "You're thinking too loud," Emery said, appearing at her side with the silence of his kind. He'd grown more comfortable with daylight over the year, no longer retreating at the first hint of sun, just remembering, Ophelia said, leaning into him, how different things were a year ago, when you were a terrified stable girl who'd just saved a child from falling, and you were an ancient vampire lord who thought he could scare me into leaving. I was never that foolish. His arm circled her waist. I knew from the moment you demanded answers in the storm that you were trouble. The best kind of trouble. The only kind. He kissed her temple, cold lips against warm skin. Though I notice you're avoiding my earlier question. What question? About the letter from the court, the one that arrived this morning. Ophelia sighed. She'd hoped to have a few more hours of peace before addressing that particular complication. They want to send more observers, want to document the bond, study it, possibly replicate it with other vampire children. And I haven't decided how I feel about that yet. She turned to face him. Part of me wants to help. If what we've built could save other children, give them the chance Owain has. But part of you fears what it could become. Emery's finished. Fears that the court will try to control it, to use bonded pairs as weapons or tools. Yes, those are valid concerns. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. What does Owain think? He says we should help. That he was lucky and others deserve the same chance. He's right. Emery's was quiet for a moment. But we proceed carefully. Set terms, establish boundaries. We share knowledge, but we don't give the court control over how it's used. You think they'll agree to that? I think they have no choice. We've proven the bond works. Now they need us more than we need them. His smile was sharp and satisfied. Leverage, remember? Ophelia laughed, feeling the last of her tension dissolve. When did you get so devious? I've been alive 8 centuries. You pick up a few tricks. They stood together in the garden, watching Owain complete his lesson and run off to play with Tegwin's grandchildren, mortal children who'd come to visit, and who treated the vampire boy as just another friend. I never thought I'd have this, Emery said quietly. A family. Purpose beyond survival. Love. Neither did I, Ophelia admitted. I thought I'd spend my life in the stables, watching other people's happiness from the outside. And now I'm here, living something impossible and beautiful and terrifying. She turned in his arms, meeting his pale eyes. Now I'm home. He kissed her then, long and deep, and Ophelia tasted winter and stone and eternity. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Whatever comes next, she said. We face it together. Together, Emery's agreed, for as long as you'll have us. Forever, then. She grinned at his startled expression. You're not the only one who's picked up tricks. The bond, it's changed me. Made me stronger, yes, but also longer lived. Tegwin thinks I might have centuries ahead of me now. Centuries. He said the word like a prayer. With me, with you, with Owain, with whatever strange, impossible family we've built here. Joy pure and brilliant and rare flashed across his ancient features. And for just a moment, Emery's looked not like an immortal lord, but like the young man he'd been 800 years ago, full of hope and wonder at the world's possibilities. Then we have time, he said, pulling her close. Time to teach Owain, to help other children, to build something good in this dark world. Time to love and grow and become whatever we're meant to be. Time, Ophelia agreed, resting her head against his chest, and listening to the absence of a heartbeat that no longer disturbed her. Together. In the distance, Owain's laughter rang out, bright and human and full of joy. The sun shone on Blackthorn Manor, painting everything in gold and silver, and for the first time and longer than any of them could remember, the future looked not like a threat but like a promise. They'd survived, they'd triumphed, they'd become something new, and they'd done it together. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.